welcome back to another episode of the Make It Happen Outdoors podcast. We've got another great episode coming to you. Something a little different. Huh, Brandon?
Yes. Yeah, it was fantastic. Kent was, perusing Instagram and found a guy that was just, what do you call it, a do-it-yourselfer? A little bit of everything. I mean, just a guy who we really got to know during the podcast, and you will too, but from the outside, and he's making stuff happen, and he's doing really well. He's in what is it, southern Idaho.
Yep.
And the guy is handy as you could ever imagine.
If you can build it, or if it can be built, he can build it, and if it's broke, he can fix it.
That's right. Yeah. So he's got a lot of YouTube followers on what he does. So you can go to, what is it? Is it Red Poppy Ranch?
Red Poppy Ranch on YouTube, yep.
Yep, and on Instagram.
And on Instagram, that's right.
And just see what this man does. Fantastic story. I mean, the guy, we sat down and got to know him, and you'll get to know him as well, because he's another, again, well, like you say, Kent, you restored your faith in humanity doing these podcasts and talking to people, just how many good people there still are out there. Because you pay attention to anything in the news, or you get on Facebook or anything like that, nobody's good anymore.
Exactly. So it's really refreshing to sit down with a wholesome family. We had Heath and his wife Cedar with us, and of course we were in his house. So there was a lot going on, and it was so much fun. And it's really refreshing. It's not even the right word. To see somebody that had a dream with his family and is now well on his way to living that dream, building your own, buying property, building your own home with your own hands, and living a self-sustaining lifestyle like they plan on doing is, it's not just a craze. It's something that, I don't know, it's deep inside of everybody, and I think everybody has that need. A lot of people just don't act on it.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And Red Poppy Ranch went ahead and acted on it, and I don't know. I think he said he's never been happier. So
I think you're right. Yeah, and it shows. Yeah, it shows. Yep. He was gracious enough to take probably time out of his building time to sit with us for a couple hours. It was a long podcast. Did. It was great though. I mean, we got into some. There's many rabbit holes we missed, not because we didn't want to hit him, but we purposely, he was talking about a lot of things, and we dove into some of them, and it was great. Just a great to sit down and listen to this man and his wife, and just get that sense of there's great people still out there.
Yeah.
People, so
I think for the folks that get on his YouTube channel and they look at his videos, watch his videos, and then listen to our podcast as a compliment to the videos, I think it's going to answer a lot of questions that people would have had. I think he gave us a lot of stuff there that's not in his videos. So
right, yeah, you're right.
A really nice compliment to his YouTube channel will be our podcast.
I think so. I think you're right. Yeah. So let's do a couple other things. Let's talk about Native by Carlton again, and we'll be just make sure you get on nativebycarlton.com. Get your elk calls, your turkey calls. These guys. We can't say enough how much we like what they do and their products.
These guys. Yeah, wholesome guys running an honest company the honest way, doing the right things, loving everything they do, and putting their pride and love into every product they make.
Yep, and it shows.
Yep.
And it shows. So next, let's throw a shout out to Pet Club 247 again.
Yeah, man, it's like you said before. It's a revolution. People are starting to wake up and realize how important it is to treat their pets right, and giving them the right treats and chews and gravies for their food, and then not to mention the Parents Pet Corner.
Yes,
they can get your own stuff too for humans.
Oh yeah, so get on, look at those things. The mush puppies, we've talked about it a million times. There's story after story of what those things are doing for the pet, and if you get on the Parent Pet Corner.
Yeah, I think I said that backwards, didn't I?
Yeah, pet, parent corner, parent, pet. I don't know. It's a corner. It's a link. So hit shop now. You'll see the link.
There you go.
And what it's done for me. I've mentioned that last podcast. And my eyesight's gotten better, and it's built my immune system. I can just tell nothing sticks around me anymore. If I start getting a cold or whatever, it's gone.
awesome.
in a day or two. It doesn't stick around for 2 and 3 weeks. So far so good there. And there's story after story. Everybody Google it. Boost your immune system. All the other things on there. CB doggies. What that does for I just gave some to my parents finally to get Ozzy, my dad's dog, because he's when my dad leaves anywhere, he's a nervous wreck. That's his. My dad found that dog, rescued it from the mountains. I think it was 7 or 8 months old. It must have lived most of its puppyhood in the mountains in central Utah, and so he was tough to come around to just being friendly. But he's attached to my dad at the hip. So
I should say.
Yeah, when my dad goes somewhere, he's nervous and wants to know what's going on. It's kind of funny. So so here'll be a test of these things when he leaves, and we've given him to my mom to make that happen. So we'll be telling that story here before too long.
Good deal.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll be another good testimonial.
Yeah, good stuff there. So lastly, let's just throw out there again, everybody, to get out and listen to the Staying Sane in an Insane World podcast with Lorenzo Pavlica and Evan Boyd. They do a fantastic job over there talking about just that, how to stay sane in an insane world, personal stories and things, how people get through things.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's such a feel good, not a feel good podcast, but it makes you feel good when you listen to stories and you see what people go through. But it lets you know that, what do they say? You take everybody's problems and put them in a bucket and you'd pick your own out, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. No doubt about it. So I guess without further ado, let's roll the podcast with Red Poppy Ranch. And Heath and his wife Cedar got on a little bit later in the podcast. But anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think that's good.
Okay, we'll get it rolling.
All right, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Make It Happen Outdoors podcast. Today we are fortunate and excited to be sitting down with Heath and his family, I guess globally known now as Red Poppy Ranch on YouTube. We are just very grateful that he allowed us to come sit down with him, and we're going to hear how Heath has made it happen outdoors in the last 3 or 4 years, and how he's making his dream come true with him and his family and all the obstacles he's got to deal with. So Heath, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get started with background. Where you grew up, just sort of who you are, and and we'll just jump down rabbit holes from there.
Sure. Grew up, both myself and my wife grew up down in Mesa, Arizona. My dad was raised in southeastern Idaho, Montpelier, just outside of Montpelier, Idaho. When he was about 16, my grandmother was from Mesa. So my grandfather was raised on a ranch outside of Montpelier anyway, and anyway, I guess I'm kind of diving into it. But so when my dad was 16, they moved down to Mesa. He grew up down there. Came back up, went to Utah State. My uncle played ball for Utah State, and then we would spend the summers up here. And so, but we were both raised down there in Mesa, and we met in high school. Myself and my wife met in high school. My dad was he was an outdoor in the sense he was a school teacher. So he was an outdoorsman in the sense that we would go fishing. He didn't like to hunt. He was more into observing than he was shooting. And so, we would fish there's a kind of a famous spot down there in Arizona, Black River is what it's called. Okay. And every summer we would spend a few days up there and catch as many smallmouth as we could. And so I just camping back in the 80s, sure. I think we'd spend a lot of time outside.
But you did say you would come back up to Idaho in the summers too.
So the first memory I have of coming back up here is probably 6 or 7 years old. And we would go spend the summers at the ranch over there. And at that time, my grandmother it wasn't a working ranch really at that point in time. My grandfather and his brothers had a working sheep company. They had like 2,800 sheep or something like that.
So it was still going though.
Yeah, but my honest opinion is I don't think my grandfather was ever into the farming and ranching lifestyle.
Right. He
was the youngest of a bunch of boys. He wasn't very big. All his older brothers played football. He wasn't very big. He was probably, 5'4", 5'5", 175 pounds. He was very well educated. He went to college. He also went down the teaching route, and so they owned the land over there. It was old homestead land, or about 1,200 acres over there. We'd spend the summers there, and between about 6 and probably 16, I think we went to the ranch 8 times, 10 times probably, and we'd spend a week or two up there. And even after myself and my wife got married, that to me was the equivalent of Disneyland.
Yeah.
I had never been to Disneyland until my early 30s, and she finally said, "We're taking the kids."
The kids have to see Disneyland.
Yeah, and truthfully, if I ever go back, it'll probably be too soon. But
I agree, by the way.
Yeah,
we are kindred spirits in that way, that's for sure.
But we'd hit Lagoon on the way up, and I have memories of Lagoon as a kid. But we'd go to the ranch, we'd wake up, and my dad had just turned me and my little brother loose, and we'd go, and the interesting part about where we live now, my wife is the one that had the connection to Franklin County here. My dad would say that my grandpa had a sister that lived here in the area. And my dad would say the only time they ever came over here was when they were dropping somebody off. Not the only time, but usually it was associated with injuries from the ranch.
Oh, okay.
And so normally they would go down through Bear Lake, back into Salt Lake or whatever. Back then, there weren't too many hospitals other than the local doctor, I guess. And so anyway, my dad, I don't ever remember coming through this area.
Okay.
We would always go around Bear Lake. But anyway, around 12 years old, my grandma passed away. And my grandpa didn't want to be up here anymore. I think there was a lot of sentimental reasons, and he tried to give the ranch to my dad. His brothers, none of them really wanted it. My dad used to say if he ever shoveled snow again, it was too soon. And grew up milking cows, and he just would talk about the cold associated with that Bear Lake Valley.
That cold settles down in there.
Ooh, yeah.
Even compared to here, it's a different kind of cold. But so anyway, about 16, I think, is when they officially sold. I was about 16 when they sold the family ranch. And all the antiques, I remember getting the pick after all my uncles and all my older cousins. I got, a few things. But I had this incredible, for whatever reason, I had this desire for that lifestyle, for that. I don't know if I had to put a finger on it. I don't know what it was. But somewhere in my teens, I guess, down there in Mesa, the outdoors was always. I was never driven. I got into bird hunting. Always loved, dove and quail hunting in high school. I had bird dogs. We still love our bird dogs, but I don't bird hunt. I would rather look at pheasants. And last weekend I went to the Pheasants Forever get together up here, and I would rather observe. To a point, I guess. I'm not opposed to it. I'll put in this year or I'll go buy over the counter tags. I'm not even going to put in for anything. I'll just go buy. I know where they hang out. So, and I'll do my best to put some meat in the freezer. But anyway, myself and my wife start, dating shortly after high school. Well, I guess I think as far as the outdoors is concerned, one of the pivotal moments in my life was. I think I was 17. My little brother went through a program called the Anazi. You guys are familiar with the Anazi Foundation down there in Mesa?
No.
Yeah.
You, Brandon?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to... It's designed for kids that are maybe struggling, I think. But it started with 2 guys that were in college, I think down at BYU, back in the 60s or something, 70s. That for, I think, one of their thesis or something, they had this site. They were both avid outdoorsmen, Ezekiel Sanchez and Larry Dean Olson.
Okay.
Larry Olson, who just passed away a few weeks ago. They took a group of kids out somewhere in Utah, and if I remember the story right, they gave them a can of peaches on day 1, and they ate the can of peaches that day, and then for the next, I think, 10 or 11 days, they used that can to cook out of,
to use as their
whatever they could catch.
This is the only utensil you have.
Yeah, and after they brought these kids back, the parents just observed this change in these kids. Like something had changed. So anyway, long story short, Ezekiel Sanchez, Larry Olson decide they're going to do this wilderness survival setting for kids to maybe. I don't think they even intended on it. The word rehab. I don't like that word, but people often use that word when they think about that. But so anyway, my little brother was probably a little rowdy, 14, 15, whatever, however old he was. And this program, it wasn't cheap. Still not cheap. No. I think back then it was $10,000, $12,000 for back then there was no limit on the days. They'd take you out there and you had to work through a number of programs, and they would, when you're ready to go home, you go home. And so he ended up spending just shy of 3 months out there. He comes back. He's not only learned some incredible skills, how to survive in the woods, but sure, he was changed. How are you not changed when you're in those settings? So probably a year after that, I was 18. I don't believe I was in the same boat that he was, but I was no means perfect either. And my parents came to me and said, "Do you have an interest?" I've always been passionate about the outdoors, but my parents said, "Do you have any interest in doing this?" So it was because I was 18, they were almost reluctant to take me. The program
you were
didn't
getting a little old for that program.
Well, I could walk away. Right. The idea was, as an adult, I could walk away. And so I said, "Heck yeah, let's do it." And this is November, so this is getting into and it's all high deserts of Arizona. Okay. And I go November 2nd. I go into this program. And the very first question you get from the other kids is, what did you do?
What are you in for? Yeah.
And I'm like, no, and I'll say this about the Anazi program is it's not a military. It's not there's no structure. If a kid wakes up one morning, we would have to hike about 22 miles a week. And this is through some of the gnarliest country in the
canyon country.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, we were just down below, the subalpine. We're in the middle of winter, so we didn't want to be up in the snow. So we try and stay down below there's an area just down from Flagstaff, Arizona, called the Bloody Basin. Okay. There's Camp Verdes right there, and so you're probably in that 5,000, 4,500 elevation. Right. A lot of junipers, a lot of sandstone, but it was still cold. I still have phobia, but my feet get cold. I don't, 20 plus years later, right?
It traumatized you.
Yeah. But so I go into this program first of November, and spend 3 months out there. So I got home the end of January, lost. I got down to 155 pounds. 6'5", 155.
I was going to say,
well, I'm down about 40 pounds than where I should be right now. When we first bought our place up there, I weighed about 235, 230, somewhere right in there. I'm about 185 pounds, 190 pounds right now. So this is what I weighed when we got married, and that's not on purpose. But
you're not complaining?
Well, yeah, there's better ways to lose weight, I'm sure. But I that was the first time. I remember when I came home, they brought us home, and there's 7, 8 kids, and they bring us into Payson, Arizona. So they dropped us off just down below Flagstaff, bring us into Payson, and we haven't eaten any normal food in 3 months. We're eating whatever we can find. They give you a little bit. Back then, they gave us a lot less than they do now. The program they give you more.
Yeah, probably more regulated now, I'm sure.
Well, it's a nonprofit. They've got everybody with ideas. But anyway, so we walk into this Bash's there in Payson, and I've had the same jeans on for 3 months. They're held together with safety pins. They're just blown apart, And we walk in there, and then my hands are black from cooking in the fire every night, and we walk in there, and the lady at the cash register, she's like, "Are you guys out fighting forest fires or what?" And I said, "No, we've been out, just living off the land." And anyway, so we go buy all the junk food, all the garbage. Ooh. And naturally, that didn't go too well. No. Between the next 2 hours, we might have stopped a few times. But anyway, I got back into town, and I think the next day I was driving around, and I'm like, why is everybody in such a hurry? I'm driving the speed limit. I haven't driven a car in 3 months, and
right,
18-year-old kid, and I'm just like, why is everybody in such a hurry? But I think that was the first time where you spend that kind of time in the woods. The noise goes away.
Oh
yeah.
The noise pollution and all that kind of stuff. You learn what the real pace of life is.
Yeah, and the survival aspect of it became second nature. And this is long before the internet. We're talking, this is probably 94, 95, somewhere right in there. And that was a moment in my life that I think still to this day is pivotal.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like the city. After that, I didn't want to be in the city. I couldn't sleep at night if I didn't hear a creek running in the background, something like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then, anyway, so shortly after this, myself and my wife start dating. Her family background is up in the White Mountains of Arizona. A lot of history up in the White Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, she had her hunter safety before I did. So she technically was ready to go elk hunting before I was. But so we start dating, and from the beginning, from the early days, we always talked about coming back up here. But my dad didn't want his kids that far away. I don't think he was adamant that all my brothers, we all were right there in the Metro Phoenix area, and we moved around too many times. 17 times, and we've been together for almost 23 years, married 21 of those years, and we moved too many times. We got one more move.
The last move is coming up.
Number 18. So why all the moving?
I think, thank goodness that my wife's got a pretty high tolerance level, but I think there was just something in me that was always looking. I don't know. We would buy and sell real estate, fix up a house. Still to this day, I've never lost money in real estate.
Okay. Even through the downturn and stuff there.
We got out of that by the skin of our teeth, but probably one of the best investments we ever made. 08, 09, we bought a house for $175,000 there in Gilbert. At the top of the market. It was valued at over $700,000.
Holy cow.
Sold it just as, the market nosed over. Then we moved from Gilbert up to Snowflake, little town up in
I know Snowflake. Been there a couple times.
Have you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Taylor and
sure.
Yeah.
We lived there for you ask my older three kids where home is. We spent more. We lived there for 7.5 years, something like that. And the White Mountains was close enough to my parents, my family, but far enough away from the big city. But the problem with the White Mountains, we watched Arizona go from 1 million people to 7 million people.
Oh, man.
And we moved from Mesa. As we first got married, we moved out to Queen Creek.
Oh, yeah, which is further south.
You could pick up an acre or two out there for nothing.
Yeah.
We watched that land explode in value. We watched we watched the mass exodus from Mesa to, I think, the second generation that grew up in Mesa. A lot of the kids were moving out there to.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think about this all the time about the things that happen in a person's life that leads them to make the decisions that they do. And I don't know, the schools I went to there in Mesa, I wouldn't send my kids to those schools.
Not now?
Yeah. Well, one of them they tore down. One of them's gone.
Yeah.
It was a rough school. I mean, Mesa High's still there. My dad taught at Mesa High for almost 40 years. My grandfather taught there, but it's, I don't know. I guess I pretend that what we have here is our little bubble, our little,
right.
But the environment in which we grew up, I think all these things obviously influence us and help us figure out who we are. But the older I got, the less I wanted to be a part of that rat race.
Yep.
And so in my early 20s, actually while we were dating still, I started training to be a plumber. I watched my two older brothers go to law school, spend 7 years of their lives going to school. I watched my brother-in-law become a surgeon. And again, my dad was very well educated, but he did not push school above and beyond graduating from high school. He did not push that. He told myself and my brothers basically that if you're in college, you can stay at home. If you're not, get out, and
yeah.
I think I left home the first time when I was like 15, and my dad would go. I just was one of those kids that was always trying to figure out why mom and dad said not to do certain things. And,
Sure, right.
And so
Got to learn for yourself.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, there's easier ways to learn, but
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
But anyway,
I can see that still today. Actually, some of that.
That's the story of my life. I'm the canary in the coal mine, I guess, for a lot of people. But I think something happened along. By the way, I've had a ton of concussions, like a ton.
From what?
Well, there's no good story other fighting and my brothers, and there's no. I wish I had some good stories to go with it, but it's doing stupid stuff. But there's part of that. I wonder if that influences how I think too. But the ironic part of it is I've never really had any major concussions since the brain has completely developed, supposedly. Right, most of these were in my youth. And so I guess I saw other paths that family member and friends were picking, and I'm going, that's it's just not for me. I got into cars in high school. Mm-hmm. My dad, I can remember my dad changing the oil on the old truck one time. Yeah. My dad was wearing nitrile gloves before anybody wore nitrile gloves because he was afraid of getting, his hands too dirty. He was one of the hardest working people on the planet, but he was not. I think he found joy in education.
Yes, his hard work was just different than what other people would call hard work.
Yeah, he was a school teacher for the right reasons.
Good.
He influenced more. His basketball. Basketball was everything to him. His older brother played for Utah State. My dad played for a junior college down there in Arizona. He wanted to be a basketball coach. That was it. And so he focused his education around PE until he had biology. He taught biology, human anatomy, and physiology for whatever it was, 30-something years. But then he was so passionate about basketball. And so I guess the collective memories that I have, if anything, it's me and my brothers beating the tar out of each other playing basketball out in the front yard.
Right.
And so...
How many brothers do you have?
I have 4 older brothers.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I have 3 older brothers, 1 younger brother.
Okay.
And then there's 2 girls on each end. So there's 5 boys right in the middle. 2 girls on each end. 20 years in between the 2 girls. But and I was at the tail end of the boys, and so my dad was older. I guess he was still super active. He just was. He was an athlete. He was one of those guys that he wasn't very big. He's probably 5'8", 5'9". It seems like maybe a little taller than that, but he was always better at everything. I'd start thinking one summer I hung out down in the bowling alley. You thought I was good at bowling, and talked my dad into going bowling with us one day. Of course, he smoked me.
First day there.
Yeah, and so it's like he was just gifted that way with.
I was thinking that's kind of like how John Stockton was his whole life, even though he's 6'1", but just naturally gifted at everything he picked up.
See, if I compared my dad's style of ball to anybody, it would be that fundamentally sound, no frills, no nothing.
That's the first thing that came to my mind too.
Yeah, and my dad actually probably was taller than what I think he was, but me and all my brothers are big guys, and my dad was always playing ball with somebody bigger than him, so he just learned how to play big.
Yeah,
But he, my 2 older brothers, one of my brothers played college ball, and basketball was just everything. And I think
your household was basketball. Yeah,
my sophomore year, I think I just got tired. With older siblings, I got tired of being told what to do. Mm-hmm. I got being tired of my sophomore year. I remember trying out for the team, and I just didn't want to play. It wasn't in me.
Yeah.
I didn't get along with the coach. I ended up going out to Queen Creek halfway through the year because my older brother's best friend was the basketball coach out there at Queen Creek, and it's going from a 5A school to I don't even know if they were 2A back then. There was like 200 kids out there.
Right.
Guaranteed to start.
Start basketball, football, baseball. I mean, it's not a one-sport school. You play all the sports. But somewhere in that junior year, I think I was just trying to figure out who I was sophomore, junior year. Mm-hmm. Who do I fit in with? Do I fit in with the jocks? Do I fit in with the Cowboys? Do I fit in with the Stoners? And I had all these guys were my friends, and it's like, I still I hated high school. My wife still talks about how much she loves high school, but So I guess during that time, I loved working with my hands. I bought, 12 years old, I bought an old Volkswagen Squareback for $50 and started tearing it apart and rebuilding it. And for some reason, that was satisfying to me. Taking something that somebody wouldn't waste their time with and turning it into something that somebody wants, and real quick, I figured out I could make a few bucks in the process. My dad put a roof over our head and clothes on our back and food on the table, and he said, above and beyond that, it's on you.
The rest is up to you.
Yeah, which again is probably the best thing that ever happened.
Now you're looking back, huh?
Yeah, I'm sure I would love to inherit some 1,500-acre farm somewhere that was been a third-generation farm that's established and whatever. But I got to be honest. I think I just think the figuring out my path and figuring out who I am and having the option to choose that. I'll forever be grateful to my parents for not forcing college. I don't believe in at this moment right now. My almost 20-year-old daughter, we sit down and talk about it, and my philosophy on education, I don't have a problem with college if you can avoid the debt.
Yeah.
But if you got to get, the return on investment, are you going to go get a 4-year degree and spend anywhere from $50 to $100,000 on student loans to get or even a master's degree to come out of school and make $50,000, $60,000 a year? You have to decide where that's at, and so I got into working with my hands. I got into the trades. Yeah. I was 19 when I started working for one of the plumbing companies down there, worked my way into a apprenticeship program, and then became a journeyman plumber. Made more money than my brothers that were attorneys fresh out of school. They eventually did just fine.
Sure.
But I think, I suppose if I have a mission statement, it would be something along those lines. Learn a trade, this whole journey, this whole Red Poppy Ranch journey thing has been really hard to, I guess, wrap my head around and understand what it's turned into, because what it's turned into was not what we started out, what we envisioned.
It's evolved differently than what you...
Yeah.
Well, what did you think at the beginning? Let's dive into that a little bit.
I think it was my kids' idea to start the YouTube channel, and part of it was for our family in Arizona to kind of see what was going on.
Sure, to keep track of you a little bit.
Yeah, and part of it also was that I would, I've always, for 10 or 15 years, I've wanted to build my own home. My wife's grandfather, when we were dating, my wife took it down to, it was southern Arizona, down there where her grandpa still has his place. And I'd like 19 or 20, and she introduces me to her 70-something-year-old grandpa who just had finished building this Adobe Santa Fe-style home, and he cast every brick himself.
Wow.
And I just was looking at this, and I'm going, actually that first trip down there, he starts showing me all his Indian artifacts that he has that had either been given to him or he'd found. And he shows me this tomahawk hatchet head, this stone hatchet head. And again, I'd only been home from Anazi for like 8 months, 9 months.
So this is still...
So it was I was very passionate about these things, and
very close to you at that point. Still,
yeah. I had this idea that I was going to get the license plate on my truck that said WNBNDN. Sound that out for your politically correct wannabe Indian.
Wannabe Indian. It should have been Indian.
Yeah.
Wannabe Indian.
I was passionate about this primitive skills, and anyway, so I meet her grandfather, and he hands me this little tomahawk head, and I knew what I look at it. Number one, I'm going, well, this is 400 years old at least, 400 to 500 years old. Where did you find it? I wanted to know. I'm trying to piece this together in my mind, and I'm trying to tell him what I think I know about 19-year-old kid trying to tell this.
Yeah.
Well, this is probably this tribe, whatever. And he at some point he stops me, and he says, "I made this." He says, "I made this myself." And I'm like, "There's no way." No, he's not. I'll show you how to do it. And he gets an old grinding stone out and a welding hammer, and he showed me how to do it. And literally, he took this to a college and had an archaeologist try and tell him it was a primitive artifact as well. That's how. So anyway, I see this, then I go, well, we're down here for a day or so, and I grabbed this stone, and I decided I'm going to make my own.
I'm going to nap my own.
Spent like he sits off in a corner and watches me for like 3 hours with this welding hammer pecking away at this little rock, trying to get the shape, and then the grinding stone, and it just didn't look right. I couldn't get it right. And after about 3 hours, my hand's bleeding, and he comes walking over and he said, "You got the wrong stone. Let's get you the right stone."
First of all, you got the wrong stone.
And then he hands me this grinding wheel and he says, "Take it back to Mesa, work on this." So I end up making my own little, which I still have downstairs still to this day. But anyway, I guess, and then he was, whether I liked it or not, he was an influence on me because he retired quite young. He built up an excavation business, and he bought and sold real estate a little bit down there in southern Arizona. And I the idea of putting 40 years in, like my father had at a job,
right?
There was something about that turned me off. Mm-hmm. That just, I in my early 20s, I was trying to figure out there's got to be a better way. I've never been passionate about being wealthy. I've been passionate about separating myself from the system.
About being independent.
Yeah, we bought our first house when I was 21. My wife had just had our oldest daughter, and it was $87,000 house. And the loan officer said, "Well, but 30 years from now, you will have paid this much money for the house." And I went, "Well, that's not going to work."
That doesn't fly.
Sold the house a year later, made a little bit of money off it, bought and sold. I guess so. To answer your question, the moves. We're buying and selling. And looking back on it, there's consequences to moving your kids around.
Sure.
There's some of that stuff that it's probably not as healthy as it could be. But we get up there to Snowflake, move up to Snowflake. That was one of the first, actually, for a short time in my early 20s, my parents retired to just north of Cedar City.
Oh, okay. So they come up.
Little town Parowan down there.
Mm-hmm. In Parowan.
Yeah. And we would go up and see them, and that was the first taste of the small town life. And I'm like, all right, this might be a little small, but I think we're on the right path.
You're right.
Mm-hmm. Got a taste of that southern Utah life, and I think that led to what. Well, I guess I should tell the backstory. So I worked my way into being a journeyman plumber. Okay, and this is my I don't know a tradesman, and again, I've got nothing against education, but I think there's lots of different ways to get an education.
Sure, lots of different type of education. Yep.
Yeah, and again, I get emails. Again, I never intended on being the catcher or the receiver of some 24-year-old kid's email that says, "Hey, I want to do what you did. How do I get there?" And I'm like, "Bro, well, number one, I try. I guess my point is there's a lot of responsibility that came with the YouTube thing.
Yeah,
right. And I don't like it. I still don't like it.
Sure, you didn't think about that at that
well,
first.
I don't want to. I guess I don't want to fail anybody. I don't want to let anybody down. But
right.
But I think the YouTube thing, I went looking for somebody that had taken a piece of raw land from start to finish. And this is, over 3 years ago. For 10 or 15 years, I had this idea of building my own home. Then the birth of the internet and YouTube, all that stuff, all of a sudden you have access to information that, is taking people thousands of years to accumulate. When I learned to start a fire with 2 sticks in the 90s, it was thought at that time that there were less than 1,000 people in the world that knew how to walk out into the woods, find the right material. Everybody says, well, yeah, you get a string and you learn at scout camp. But to know what to use, especially in your climate and your, whatever it is.
The right kind.
Yeah, it was thought that there were like 1,200 people in the world. Now, good gosh, you got every kid with a smartphone out in his backyard, and you got whole Instagram pages devoted to this stuff. Sure. So
countless wilderness survival schools now.
Oh yeah, which is great again, but I didn't have access to that kind of information. So when the 23, 24-year-old kid emails me and says, "Hey, I want to do what you are doing now at almost 42," my first response is I couldn't have done this at 23 or 24. I may have had a little more stamina in a 12-hour day,
right.
but I didn't have the bandwidth. I didn't have the understanding. I didn't have the patience.
Yeah, wisdom, experience, all sorts of things.
Yep. Yeah, all that stuff. And so, I don't know, but anyway, so I started going on YouTube, really looking for. I want to find somebody. Is there anybody that's taken a piece of raw land? And this is after, by the way, after we'd already purchased our land. If I knew what this was going to turn into, I definitely would have documented it better.
Sure, because you can look. That's your hindsight now, right?
Yeah, that early stuff, I think I definitely didn't put into perspective the hard work associated with just clearing that land and all that stuff. But anyway, I'm sure there's lots of people out there that have done it but nobody took the time to shoot it and film it, and then we start down this path of clearing this land, and the initial thought was we'd have a house in town here and we'd have a weekend house up there. I didn't want to buy that land when I first saw it. My cousin, he turns me on to it, and we're already living up here, and so people ask me all the time where's the best place to find land to do something like this, and my thoughts are you need to be aware of what's around you. I have all the moves that we've done. I have this philosophy that when we would move to a new area, we would never buy anything for at least a year, because we wanted to make sure we bought something in the right spot, right part of town, right whatever.
Yeah.
And again, that gets old too, because you're oftentimes moving again and again. But anyway, so I had found 40 acres just over the hill here from where we're at.
Okay.
But it was flat, no trees, didn't have a tree on it, if I remember right. And I'm trying
just farm ground almost at that point.
Basically, right? It's right at the Bear River bottom, and I'm going, well, this is usable ground. Who wants a hillside covered in trees? You can't even stick your arms out and spin around without hitting something. And my cousin calls me. He's like, I already bought the lot next to the one lot. And I'm like, well, dude, don't you think you ought to come up here and maybe look at it? No, I saw a picture on Google Earth. We're good.
So he bought it sight unseen.
Sight unseen. And
Google Earth scene.
Yeah.
The research you can do.
Which a Google Earth picture is, 3 years old? It's not even an accurate picture.
Right.
And so we jump in her. So we're looking at this piece of land out here, and we're looking at this piece of land where our ranch is. And the road, it was like March. This is 3 years ago. We tried to drive up in there in her 4-wheel drive Expedition, and I do have a clip of this, and the Expedition is sideways. Just, it is so nasty getting back in there. And she looks at me. She's like, "You're out of your mind. If you think we're going to raise a family up here."
That was her fault. She said, "You're out of your mind."
Yeah.
The challenge was on.
There was, but I still was not in. I wasn't in, and I think we waited a month and a half. So they bought their land. I think we still waited like 2 months, and then we drove up there like probably about a month, 3 weeks from about right now. We go up there and all the maple trees are budding out, and the grass is coming through, and the snow's gone, and it's like, the heavens parted.
It's that heaven, yeah. I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah. And
this is the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even still, I'm just looking at the trees, and it's super hard to get perspective when you can't see. I tell people, wintertime is a great time to go look at land because the leaves are off the trees. You can actually have a little more depth perception and different things. But so we buy this land, and that I can't stand to watch. I barely watch our YouTube video. I watch them one time. I'll watch our videos one time, and I'll never watch them again. I have maybe one or two that I go back and watch from time to time because it kind of reminds me of the struggle a little bit. But I don't like the sound of my own voice. I don't like, I guess we're our own worst critics.
Right? Yeah.
And so I put a video up, and I still don't understand why somebody would watch what we're doing. But, I don't know. It started out as this journey that what's interesting is in the early days, we probably got more attention from the reality TV stuff than naturally we do now. But And when you have a production company call you up and say, hey, we want to make a TV show about you, and all of a sudden you start to feel like you're doing something right. Mm-hmm. And you know, the very first phone call we got like that was from, what's their names, production company, Chip and Joanna Gaines is High Noon.
Oh, yeah.
Over there out of Colorado. And they called us up and they were trying to build a show around the idea. And so anyway, I guess the long story short is I've made some mistakes along the way for sure. If I go back and do things differently, I most certainly would have. But at the same time, you know, in life in general, I think this is just. I tell my kids there's two ways to learn. Either you can touch the stove, or you can trust me when I tell you the stove's hot. But one way or another, you're going to learn. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, there's. It's just that simple. And so, sometimes experience
is the best teacher.
Is the best teacher. Yeah. And so, you know, I don't know. To think that where we are, compared to even a few years ago, there's part of it is I never look at any of the. My mom is obsessed with subscriber count, with comments, right? And I'm just like,
you don't have the time or the patience or the law.
You know, the YouTube comment base. I would say 99.9% of the people that comment are incredibly positive, but YouTube has a tendency to be a little bit more. People are more aggressive than
just like
other social media platforms, you know. And so, you know, in the very early days when we started this thing, the businessman kicks in me, I guess. The entrepreneur kicks in. You know, Google sends you a little bit of money, and all of a sudden you go, wait a second, maybe there's something to this, you know. And, and I read a few articles about building a YouTube channel, and one of the first things I read is respond to every comment, interact with the people that are watching you. Okay. And so I start there. You know, I don't have any other social media experience. I'm not right. famous in any other aspect of my life at that time. To, you know, you hear people say that. You hear people, you know, famous people say, ignore the comments, ignore the. Right. But I don't have any other credibility, and I'm trying to get people to, I suppose, to watch the next video. And so you know, especially the people that were genuine. I feel like I even know some of these people, you know, for the last few years. These people go out of their way to comment on a video and say something positive, and it might even be criticism of something I did, but they say it in a way where they're offering perspective, and maybe they have more experience, whatever. But then there's always one jackass.
Yeah. Well, and isn't the bad part about it is, you know, bad news spreads 100 times faster than good news, and you get so much more angst out of somebody saying something bad than you do out of 100 people saying something good. Of the pleasure of that, it's a very weird human phenomenon, I guess you'd call it, and how that works.
Well, it's nice to know I'm not the only one.
No, I think it's everybody. You know, because when it comes to business, you know, did you have a plumbing business? Yeah. You own your own plumbing business in Arizona, and we'll get to that in a minute as well, because I own my own civil engineering firm. Sure. And I have for the last 20 years. And the same thing happens. You know, you get one person saying something bad, and I seem to want to spend all my attention on fixing that problem as opposed to just the 20 people that I'm keeping very happy, keeping them happy. It's a strange little thing you try to get over and you work through, and you know. So back to the YouTube stuff. What do you do with that?
Well,
0.1%.
I finally handed it off to the wife, and I'm like, I just can't do it. I can't. Yeah. I'm not emotionally. I'm this close to, you know, having a meltdown. I've been that way for, you know, growing up with four brothers. You communicate with your fists,
sure,
and you typically talk. You speak open-minded about. You got an issue with somebody. You know, I got my ass handed to me by my brothers on a daily basis. So, you know, my older brother, just older than me, is one of my best friends now. But the worst fights, and my brother just younger than me, the worst fights I've ever been in my life, to the point where going to the hospital, we're with those two.
We're with those two.
Oh, yeah. My little brother, worst concussion I've ever had. My little brother. I was 21. He was 18. He was a big boy. You know, he was a big boy back then. And you know, that was the last real bad fight I've ever been in, you know, but still you have, you know, I'm 42. I'm not in the best health I've ever been in, but in my brain, I'm still this confrontational 18-year-old kid that's going to tell you
that part.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and some of that, I think you're compensating for something, right? You're compensating for inadequacies in your own brain, you know, the lack of confidence. And so when I guess I see you try to ignore the negative. I don't respond. You know, for years I would go through the comments and I would thank people for taking time and so as far as YouTube's concerned, I don't even look at the comments anymore.
Oh, okay.
I hand it off to the wife and I'm like, don't even tell me. You know, if it's a legitimate question, sure, ask me. But through Instagram and through Facebook, if people want to message me, they can message me, and I always respond. Email me. I bet I get, you know, sometimes 5-6 emails a day, just questions or comments. The positive, you know, reinforcement that a lot of these people, they can see I'm a little fragile over here, I guess, but
that's all right.
There's our next T-shirt we got to make. But you know, somewhere along the way, this, I guess, thinking back about how I grew up, even the junior high that I went to, the fighting was every day, constantly. The school was about 50%. It seems like it was 50% minority, 50% Anglo at that time.
Okay.
And that changed, got down to where it was almost, you know, 25% Anglo, Caucasian, whatever. And it was just a rough school. Just a rough school. Everybody was fighting every day. You saw fighting. You know, I still remember it was just violent. I don't know why in the 80s. And I remember...
well, at least they were fighting with their fists then and not guns. Like they do now.
Yeah, for sure. And most of the time that would solve the problem. But I remember, I think I was in 8th grade, and there was a 9th grader that I don't even know I still remember the guy's name. I can tell you the guy's name, but they said to get into some gang or something, he actually went over and shot a security guard at the Mesa Temple, killed the guy.
Wow. No kidding.
And so they went to prison. But it was just like I had my group of friends, but it was like, you know, there was probably some PTSD in there somewhere that comes from being wound a little bit tight. You know, I still can remember 9th grade, sitting in shop class, and a kid comes up behind me, quite a bit smaller than me. I was always a beanpole. I was tall, but I was a beanpole, and the kid comes up behind me, and I'm sitting, there's like, you know, 10 minutes left of class. All of a sudden I get cracked in the back of the head to the point where I see stars, you know, and I've been punched, but I'd never seen stars before. And I shake it off and I turn around, and there's him and like 4 other guys standing in a half circle. And he had hit me so hard that he actually ended up breaking his hand.
Okay.
And he's like, we're gonna jump you. We're gonna jump you after class, you know. And I'm like, I barely know who you are, you know. And so he goes out, the bell rings, he goes out, and I'm like, you know, if I go outside, I'm gonna get rolled up by these guys.
Right.
And my friend, who was the teacher's aide in the class, he's like, let's go out the back. Let's just avoid all the conflict. Let's get you out the back door. So I go out the back door. The rest of the day, I'm thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow when I see the kid. There's like 4 days left of school. And I'm like, you know, what am I going to do? So this is the honest truth. I think statute of limitations is long gone now. But I go and get my scout camp knife, my Geronimo knife, and I put it in my pocket. I'm like, this dude puts his hands on me again. I don't know what else to do. And
at this point, at that age, you don't know. There's no other outs for you.
I try to tell my older brothers. My older brothers like, stop being a sissy. Just handle it or whatever. And I don't think I was consciously thinking I'm going to stab the guy, but if I got to pull it out and create a little distance, my Cub Scout knife, you know. And so I go to school that next day, and he ends up getting expelled. The kid ends up getting expelled. Over that summer, this kid was involved with a murder, and he went to prison. and in his youth went to prison. So fast forward. I have like 4 friends from high school that I've maintained somewhat maintained a relationship. Mm-hmm. One of them I talk to almost at least once a week. The rest of them, this is where social media, I guess, bridges the gap. But I don't care to see most of these people because it doesn't represent a positive place in my life.
Right,
and
so why?
I didn't go to my 20-year reunion. I don't think we've gone to any of my reunions. Cedar's gone to every one of hers. but so I think it's probably been 6-7 years ago. I have one friend from high school, and he has this mechanics shop. He's got his own shop, and he would call me from time to time, and he'd be like, "Dude, we got the truck in. You put the money up, I'll fix the truck. Let's flip the truck, whatever." And we were just always doing stuff like that. I was always wheeling and dealing, buying cars, fixing up hot rods. I love old hot rods.
We'll talk about that in a minute too.
Yeah,
I spent some time with some hot rods.
Yeah, I'm probably more of a car guy than anything. But anyway, so I'm 36, 37 years old. I haven't been a plumber for a while at this point, so I'm not in fighting shape, I guess. At that time, I was a little bit soft, I'm sure. And I walk into his shop, and I'm wearing slacks, button-down shirt and slacks. And in the corner of my eye, I can see this dude that's tatted from head to toe, wearing a wife-beater tank top. And he looks like he's been doing push-ups for about 15 years.
Yeah.
And out of the corner of my eye, I can see he's trying to get my attention. And I'm talking with somebody else in the shop. And this guy walks over to me, and he goes, "Hey, bro, you remember me?" And he tells me who it is. And
it comes back real quick.
And I'm carrying a gun on me. I carry, I have my concealed carry, and emotions come back from 9th grade.
Oh, wow.
And I stopped, and I walked out to my car, and I took my gun off, set my gun in the car, walked back in there, and I was ready to go. And my buddy could tell something wasn't right, and we start talking. And thank goodness there was like some customers came in. I wasn't about to make a scene in front of them. But I'm like, I don't care what the outcome is here. We got to settle this.
It's going to be, putting this to bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've had I've thought about this too many times, and I'm ready to go. And my buddy comes over, and I told him what this was. And this is, by the way, this buddy I also went to junior high with.
Right,
so we've known that.
He knows the story.
Yeah, I told him. Mm-hmm. And somewhere in the middle of this, he just tells me to leave. He's like, "Just get out of here," And so the next day, I go down to his shop again, and he says, "I told this guy." He says, "I told him about what you said." He said he couldn't even remember it. He said he hadn't even thought about it. He said, and he apologized. The guy apologized.
No kidding.
And he said, "Look, at that time," he said, "I was so much smaller than everybody else." He said, "I was just constantly doing things to try and make myself feel bigger."
Yeah.
Kind of Napoleon complex.
Yeah, yeah. And somewhere in the middle of that, I went, this guy's got a story too. Frankly, he's had a harder go than I have, after 15 years in prison. So somewhere in the middle of that, first of all, I went, "You got to stop with this crap. You're too old to be doing this stuff." Right? But I guess the emotions that are tied up around all these experiences that we have a tendency to influence, how we are later on. And somewhere along the way, I didn't like being told what to do.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I worked my way into a journeyman position, 23 years old, making a good living. I get an opportunity to go work for a competing company in management at 23. Okay. And this is when we had moved up there to Parowan.
Oh, okay.
So I went to work. I left the company that trained and taught me everything. One of the managers from that company went to this other competing company, big company. And I went to work for them for like 6 weeks before we decided we were going to move up there to Parowan. Moved up to Parowan, and the owner of that company called me not my buddy that was the manager, the owner, called me every Monday morning. And he says, "When are you going to come back? When are you going to come back?" And I was a commission-paid service plumber. So the fastest way to my heart was commission. I love commission. Still to this day, I love commission. And for 6-8 months, this guy would call me every Monday morning And he would say, "We want you in our service department. I saw
I
your."
can see why when you say that. I'm sure he did.
Well, I had accounts. I had all these different things, and I was ambitious. I was 24. I was a hustler. I knew because I started out in the warehouse at that first company. I knew the inventory on these service trucks. There was a lot of things that worked out in my favor that I didn't realize at the time. And 6 months. So I went to work for another plumbing company up there. One Saturday I was on call or something, and it snowed like 18 inches or something crazy. And I didn't even have muck boots. I didn't have anything. I'm out there fixing somebody's broken water line, and this guy, in the middle of all this chaos, this owner calls. And he's like, "When are you going to come back?" And I finally just kind of said, I said, "Look, here's the deal." I said, "I will never come back and work for that person who was a friend of mine. I can't work for him. His ambition and my ambition just don't line up. He's not, in my opinion, he was not looking to change the world, I guess. He was looking for the paycheck." And the owner said, "Well, what if we give you his position as the service manager?" All of a sudden, I come home and we sit down, and I went, "Look, that's not a job a 23-year-old kid gets, to be a service manager of a large company like that." I said, we need to think about it, and we spent some time thinking about it. And end result is they offered me a salary plus bonuses, but the terms were I literally took this guy's job.
Yeah.
And so after wrestling with it, and the owner kept telling me, "No matter what you decide, this guy, the guy that literally trained me, is going away. He's going somewhere else. We're going to hire somebody else because we need somebody that's really going after it, and we're just not sure if he's the guy." And he's a good guy. There's nothing wrong with the guy. And so I kept justifying making this decision, ultimately terminating the guy.
Right.
Right.
So I kept telling myself, well, the owner kept saying, the guy kept saying he's going to replace him. Whether I take the job or not, he's going to replace him. So I agreed to take this job. And I literally had to sneak. We moved back to town. We don't tell anybody. We can't tell anybody why we're there. Mm-hmm. The day I'm supposed to start, this Monday morning, I sneak into the office. I get there an hour and a half before he shows up. I go upstairs in the conference room. The owner comes up there, shaking my hand, telling me how great the decision I made to come work for him was and all this. And
this was back to Mesa, right?
Back to Mesa, yeah. And but he looked at me, and he said, "Whatever happens between you and so-and-so is between you and so-and-so, and you're in management now. You get to figure this out." Okay, you have to figure. And he said, "By the way, you can't fire him. You cannot fire him. Okay, if he wants to quit, that's one thing, but you cannot fire him. If he becomes, just a stick in the mud and refuses, you can't fire him. Sorry, you have to figure out how to work together." And so he was being demoted back to a service truck. And so, I'll never forget that morning. I'm sitting up there in my, nice clothes, and I'm not wearing, my uniform or whatever. And the owner brings this guy upstairs, and he walks in the conference room, and he closes the door, and he looks at me, and he's like, "Bro, why didn't you call me? You're back? What are you doing? We should go fishing. Why aren't we fishing?" All this stuff, and I'm just going, "Oh my gosh,
how do I start this conversation?"
Well.
Right.
And the owner, I'm trying not to say names here, the owner just lays it out. He says, "Well, here's the deal. You've been knocked back to service plumber. Heath is now in control of the service department. What he says goes. I'm out." And he gets up and walks out and says, "You guys got to work this out." So my buddy's just kind of sitting there, and he's just like, "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me something was coming? Why didn't you tell me this was coming?" And I'm like, "They made me sign NDAs. They made me sign." I said they wouldn't let me tell anybody anything. He's like, "But we're friends. Before this ever happened, we were friends. I've known you since," and I'm just going, but he told me you were going to, it was, if I didn't take the job, somebody else, and he's like, "It's not the point. It's not the point. It's not the point." For the next probably 3 months, this guy, we almost went at it in the front yard of his house when I went to get his credit card and his keys, and right in front of his wife and kids.
Oh, man.
And somewhere in the middle of it, I knew I'd bitten off more than I could chew.
Yeah, it was.
And it lasted maybe a month and a half, 2 months, something like that. and he's quite a bit older than me. I mean, not quite a bit, 6 or 7 years older than me, I guess. But he had more management experience than I had. And one day he walked into that office, and I literally wasn't sleeping. The stress on that level I'd never had before.
Well, stop for just a second, because when you were talking about making that decision and the words you were using just talking to us, I got the feeling you knew something wasn't right. Even though you made the decision to go, you probably knew deep down inside there was something that was just not right about that decision.
Well, again, you think about that corporate setting. It's a rung on the ladder, right? Mm-hmm. It's a rung on the ladder. In the unfortunate world, the competitive world of traditional business, there's not a whole lot of room for loyalty. I mean, at least that's how I was thinking at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. But I wasn't so ambitious that I was willing to, roll this guy up that really was
you weren't
instrumental.
looking to go stepping on heads to get.
No, because the truth is he wouldn't have done that to me. I don't think he would have. So about a month and a half after this happens, he for that month and a half, he'd made my life hell. He deliberately just was trying to. He somehow figured out that I couldn't terminate him, and so he's just like, we're just going to ride this thing into the dirt, and we're going to see. And about a month and a half later, he walks in and sets the keys on my desk, and he's like, look, there's no way you're going to be able to perform at your best with me working here. He's like, there's just no way. He's like, so I quit. He quits, and he ends up going and starting his own business. And so I get over that hurdle, I guess. And now I think I'm, clear sailing, but still I'm a 23-year-old kid with no management experience, running a division in a multi-million-dollar company.
How many plumbers did you have?
I only had a handful. We were just trying to get that service department off the ground. But as a total, there was 160, and there were 7 different managers running that company. And the owner, I learned more, good and bad. I learned more from that man and that experience than probably any other experience in my life. Family business. He was a very successful. He'd built a concrete company and sold out, made a bunch of money. He didn't know anything about plumbing, but he bought that company, and he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, Heath, I bought a plumbing company because I want to make money when I sleep. He said, you can only pour concrete certain hours a day.
So many hours a day, yep.
And I was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That was our job for years. And he said that to me, and as a young man, I went, well, that's an interesting perspective. And so anyway, I spend the next 3.5 years working for this man, and I have my nice corner office, and then somewhere in the middle of that, he's in his mid-50s at the time. He brings his son in, basically turns the company over to his son. His son runs the construction side. His daughter runs the office. And, somewhere in the middle of that, the stress level, well, after my first year, I'd been commission up to that point. Mm-hmm. Now I'm salary with profit sharing,
Right.
And we took that company, by the way, over 4 years. We took that company from $3 million a year to $68 million a year.
Oh, cow.
And the profit sharing was, a $3,500 bonus at the end of the year, whatever it was. And at the end of that first year, I just walked into his office. I said, this isn't going to work. I said, I want a piece of my department. I need to have that motivation that comes with commission.
Right.
For some reason, that's what drives you.
Yeah. I said, look, I'm not bringing all my accounts over here that I worked hard to develop for peanuts, and he didn't like that. He didn't like that. He wanted to keep me in the same pay scale as all the rest of management, but he reluctantly gave in, and I got a piece of my department from that point on. That went on for another few years, but it was a meat grinder. It was this traditional business meat grinder. It was a family business that somewhere along the way I realized I'll never be family.
Right.
Yeah. And it wasn't that I needed ownership. It wasn't that I needed. Stock or any of that stuff. But I wanted to feel like I was more than a cog in the machine. Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
And one day I came in, and the son, who had actually become fairly good friends, the dad had gotten to a point where he would come in on Friday, sign the paychecks, and split. And avid hunter, by the way, loved to hunt. We would travel once or twice a year, and oftentimes we were out in the woods, and we'd go up to his cabin, we'd go up to different places, and his dad finally had reached the point where he was ready to remove himself from the situation. And so one morning I walk in, and the son decides to get after one of my guys about something. And this turns into an issue between me and him. And I'm like, look, dude, there's a chain of command here. You go through me and let me deal with this if there's a real issue. And it was just the end of too many things. It was, again, this being told what to do, the pressures of expectations of somebody else. There was one day when Cedar was, I think it was either our second or third, who would have been Cheyenne, maybe one of the kids. She was pregnant. And I would go down to my office Monday through Sunday. I was down there. I wasn't like the other guys that basically showed up at 5, went home at 3. I worked when I had to be there, and I understood that. And when I wasn't working, my phone was ringing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If one of my plumbers, one of my techs couldn't figure out what was going on, I was the fallback.
Right.
So one afternoon, I'm sitting in my office, and it's like 4 o'clock. I'd been there since 5 o'clock that morning, 5:30 that morning, whatever it was. And I'm playing solitaire on my computer. My computer monitor is facing the door. So over my shoulder, I see the daughter walk in the room, look and see me playing solitaire on the computer. Turn around, walk out. The next morning, I walk in, and I've got a form on my desk that says I've been written up for misuse of
company resources.
Yeah. And so I see that, and I freaking lose it. This is the older brother's picking on me again, and all the emotions. I walk into the owner's office, and I'm like, I ain't signing nothing. You can fire me here and now. I said, I put more hours into this job than anybody, and you're going to compound my stress with this crap?
Yeah, no.
I said, fire me. And he hemmed and hawed, and he wouldn't fire me. I said, how many of these things do I get before you fire me? How many times do I get written up before you terminate me? Well, the company policy says 3. I said, well, I'm not signing anything. I said, I'll tell you what to do with that. I was never disrespectful to the owner, but I made it very clear. And I walked back into my office, and a few hours later, he comes back and he said, well, I read company policies, and there's nothing in it that says you have to sign it. So here's your first warning. Here's your first write-up, And by the time I finally quit, I think I'd been written up like 7 times or something. My goal was to double,
Yeah, let him.
But this is the environment. It was a meat grinder. It wasn't like, the joys I thought would come with grabbing that next rung on the ladder and separating myself from all the other guys. It just wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And if I have pride in anything, I have pride in relationships. I have pride in, the accounts that I had brought to that company were through relationships. Yep. They were not through because of that guy that owned the company. They were because of people that trusted me. They knew I'd be there when the phone rang. I'm not tattooed from head to toe. I don't whatever. I learned real quick being squeaky clean gets you in some little old lady's door.
Sure.
When you don't smell like cigarettes, and I learned that real quick. Mm-hmm. And I made a lot of money just because I'd sit and listen to. My wife used to say, "If you can make money off these little old ladies, we'll be just fine." Spend a half an hour talking with them, seeing how the family's doing. Actually care about what was going on.
That's exactly it.
And that fed my family for the next, however many years. But anyway, the son. We get into it over one of my guys. I walk back in my office, and I'm just like, and we'd been talking about starting our own business for quite some time.
Yeah,
I'm 26, almost 27 at this time. We're in the middle of a huge remodel on our Gilbert house. Market's raging. This is probably 2007, I'm guessing, somewhere right in there. 2005. Actually, it was earlier than that, 2004, 2005. I mean, like overnight, houses are on the market for 24 hours. We were running crews 7 days a week at that time, plumbing crews.
Yeah.
And
new construction crews?
Yeah, new construction. It just was insane. And the owner, I will say, he kept saying to me, Heath, we make hay when the sun shines. This isn't going to last. He said, I'm telling you, this isn't going to last. Let's figure the bids out. Let's get this. And so he taught me a lot about that aspect.
Yeah.
But I walked back into my office and I just said, I can't. The stress. I'm just. It's time to start my own business. I walked back into the son's office, set my credit card, set my keys, set my cell phone. And he panics naturally. He's like, no, hang on. And he actually started crying. We were pretty good friends. I think that he went, all right, I went too far with this. And then he asks me to step out of the office, and I could hear him call his dad.
Yeah.
Dad's not there, and he calls the dad, and he's like, what do I do? And dad's like, look, if he wants to quit, his dad was old school. His dad was, look, nobody's irreplaceable.
Right.
His dad was just like, look, these people are employees. There was a moment when I realized the mindset when the grandson, we were at a company party, and the grandson, so this is the owner's grandson, runs up to me. He's like 7 years old at the time. He runs up to me and he points and he goes, "My daddy owns you."
Oh.
And I just went, well, what's this kid hearing at home?
What's he hearing?
Yeah. And the interesting thing is the son or the father of this little boy heard him. So the general manager of the company heard him and actually got after him.
Yeah.
Jason wasn't that big of a knucklehead. He was a good guy. I actually still this day liked him. I quit. I quit my job. Jason just says, "Look, we worked this out," and I'm like, "Nah, it's time to go, man. It's time for me to go." This is right as the Nextels, nobody had cell phones at that time. It's like,
right.
I walk outside. I don't even have a way to get home. I don't even have a way to call. And so I walk back in and I'm like, "Dude, can I use the phone?"
You need to borrow a phone.
Yeah. And he's like, "You do whatever." And so I call my father-in-law, who happens to be a couple miles away, and I call him up, and he's my father-in-law's a general contractor. Cedar's dad's a general contractor.
So is that where you learned your framing skills and all that kind of stuff?
Don't blame him for.
Okay.
No, I didn't know. I didn't ever, other than doing small projects. I think I just learned my framing skills by being just on the jobs and figuring stuff out.
Oh, awesome.
And really that house up there is a fairly simple, it's about as ergonomically, it's a rectangle house that if you can't frame that house, you got problems.
Right. But anyway, sorry.
So her dad comes and gets me, and he's like, "What are you going to do?" He's like, again, I'm 26, 27 years old. I'm probably a little young to be starting my own business, and he's like, "No, you know what? You'll be fine. We'll figure it out." He's like, your relationship should be fine. So I get home, and I have no truck. We're in the middle of this huge. I literally have no truck. She has her Tahoe. I had a company truck, and I get home, and people had already started calling the house. "You gonna go out so I don't cry in front of you, or are you gonna make this worse?"
Yeah.
Anyway, people had already started calling the house. The contractors that I had relationships started calling the house.
News travels fast.
Yeah, and they're just like, they call up and they're like, "We're with you.
Wherever you go,
if you can put the crews together, we will give you the bids. We will give you the existing bids that your former employer. Our relationship is with you. It's not with them." And then I'm like, "All right, we'll figure this out." And again, this is in the middle of this just insane real estate grab.
Right. Yeah.
Where,
what's going on then?
Everybody that had a company was either killing it or they were selling out to bigger companies and really crushing it, right? And riding off into the sunset. So in my mind, I'm going, my older brother, who's an attorney, he'd actually just graduated from law school, but he was still doing plumbing on the side. Just kind of, I think he was a prosecutor for Phoenix or somebody at that time. He had more new construction experience, so I'm like, I'm going to call him. We're going to partner. I'm going to go out and get 50 trucks. We're going to go big. If we're going to do this, we're going to go big, And so that's my thought process. I had a line of credit on our house, a 6-figure line of credit. And I'm like, we're going to use that to fund the company. And I call him up. I got my brother Ben. I call him up, and I'm like, you want to do this? And I could see he's like, dude, I'm trying to put that plumbing thing behind me, man. And I could just see that his wife wasn't on board. And so I'm like, all right, maybe we need to slow back this thing off a little bit. Somewhere in the middle of this, I realized all the security that my wife had, the insurance, the guaranteed salary every week, the company truck, the company credit card, stuff was gone.
Yeah.
Stuff was gone, and I think that terrified Cedar, absolutely terrified Cedar. And somewhere in the middle of that, I buy 2 old beater box trucks that got 200,000 miles on them, pay cash for them, outfit them with equipment. My first year in business, I did $500,000 in gross sales. My second year in business with 4 people, I think we did $500,000. But we just got by, and we started out, and that was right in the transition of us wanting to get out of the Metro Phoenix area, and we put the house up for sale just as the market starts to nose over.
Right.
Managed to sell the house, managed to get out of it. And I kept thinking about if I'd gotten all these trucks, if I'd gone into all that debt, I would be...
You would have been wiped.
Like a bunch of my buddies. Like a bunch of guys I knew that... Everybody.
Like 4 out of 5
Yeah.
business owners at that time.
Yeah.
Construction guys.
And so we still move up to Snowflake. We find a rental house. And the crazy part is our mortgage on the Gilbert house was $2,700 a month. Between the mortgage payment and the line of credit. We were paying $1,000 a month up there in Snowflake for a rental house. We had the house for sale in Gilbert, and we had dozens of offers. And this goes back to getting an experienced realtor, I guess. Most realtors, I hate to say this, but they either don't have the experience. I think it's 9 out of 10 realtors never sell a house in the U.S. They get licensed, never sell anything. My buddy had just gotten his license, $700,000 house. The commission on that obviously is huge, and so he's like, dude, I'll sell it for 1%.
1%.
So he's like, we're gonna have to pay the other realtor fees. He's like, you move to Snowflake, do whatever. I'll show it. I bet we showed it 150 times over that 9 months. We had multiple offers north of what I ended up selling it for. $625 offer somewhere in that range, and he kept saying, "We'll get more. We'll get more."
But your remodel was done by this
Everything was
time.
done. We finished it.
Oh man!
And I'm trying to get this company off the ground up in the White Mountains. He keeps saying, "We can get more. We can get more. We can get more." And somewhere in the middle of that, I just went, he may not be the guy. He's telling me to pass on these offers. Now you can just see every day the market going.
Yeah, you seriously, day by day, you just felt things just going south.
Oh, and then all of a sudden, one of the lenders comes out and says, "Yeah, we won't loan on a house over $450,000 unless you've got half the money down." And I'm thinking, it's going from bad to worse. And so I'm still paying the payments on it, right? And my parents, by the way, moved back from Parowan to Mesa, and they were having a track house built, and they lived in it, moved into it, lived in it, but I don't even think I charged them rent. But I called another friend who was an experienced realtor. Excuse me. And he says, I call him up. So I call my buddy that was selling it for 1%. I'm like, we got to shut this thing down. I'm going to have to find somebody else I basically said, look, you're not the guy. Sorry. And that kind of created a little rift between me and him. Not really, but we're still friends. But anyway, so I call this other friend who'd been a realtor for like 17 years. And I call him up, and he's like, well, first of all, I don't work for discounted fees. You're paying me a full 3.5%. And that, I'm looking for some deal. But looking back on it, I wouldn't expect anything less. If he's good at his job.
That's what he does, yep.
Yeah. As a plumber, for me to show up, and for you to immediately try and talk me down, I turn around and walk right back.
Yeah, sorry, I'll go next door.
I know what I'm worth, and why should I? If you're not willing to pay me that, I'll get it from somebody else. So, but we had to take the house off the market for 90 days to let it refresh. Take the house off the market for 90 days. Literally to the day later, I called this guy Roger. I called him back. I'm like, dude, it's 90 days. Let's get the house back on the market. And he goes, Heath, every comp we've had on your house has dropped $50,000 to $100,000 in the last 90 days. And so the $625,000 offer, all these offers, he goes, we're going to list your house for $580,000 and we're going to pray. He goes, we're going to pray. He said, I don't know what else to do. He said, every day, they're dropping $15,000, $20,000, $25,000, $30,000. And all of a sudden, I'm counting all the money slip through my fingers that, was never mine. And the second day the house was listed, somebody came and looked at it. Went and looked at a second house. He drove and literally followed them with their realtor to the next house and talked them out of that house, talked them into buying. He's the only realtor I've ever had
that would do something like that.
And they came in with $250,000 cash and bought the house. And so they make an offer. They offer back $535,000. And again, I want to run my head into a wall.
Yeah.
I'm just counting the money slipping through my fingers. We sell the house. The house closes. Within 6 months, that house was a $250,000 house. And so at some point, the smoke cleared, and I went, well, I'm not bankrupt. Like a lot of people. I didn't lose anything.
Yep.
Yeah. And
still got a roof over my head.
And the business was we were still getting by up there in the White Mountains. By the way, that company, we sold that company 7 years ago. It's the biggest plumbing company in the White Mountains still. But it, I've had a series of these little, and by the way, we rode the market down, bought a house for $50,000 in Snowflake, fixed it up, turned around, sold it, made money off it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, I have confidence in real estate, but it's also guarded. I feel like we're on the verge of, our number one objective up there this next year is to just pay the last little bit off that we own our land and be free and clear, be done. We haven't taken on any debt to build our place, which ended up being a blessing in disguise. I tried to in the beginning. I tried to borrow a mortgage, and that's a different story. But anyway, we started our own business. We ran our own business there in Metro Phoenix area. We sold our clientele, moved to the White Mountains, built that business up. And then when I was about 33, I'm always the guy that's just looking for the other income stream.
Yeah.
Whether it's the ADD, ADHD, I don't know what it is. When the market was booming, we would sell tools, a very specific plumbing tool that when I left that company, my wholesalers, one particular wholesaler contacted me and said, we will give you the same prices as if you were spending $4 million a year with us like the previous company. That's how much we want you to succeed. That's how much we believe in what you're doing. So somewhere in the middle of that, I figure out that these $700 tools, my cost on was $175 through this wholesaler. So we set up a little side hustle where Cedar would package them up and shit. We'd sell 50, 60 of them a week. I think we sold 500,000 of them, or $500,000 worth of them that year. And, we were always just, doing little things. And naturally, when the market went to crap, everybody that bought those tools was selling them right back on the internet. And so there was no market for that. But plumbing, I tell people all the time, I think it's super important to live with passion and to live with purpose. Okay, but you can't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Yeah. I don't know if this is a millennial thing. I'm not willing to categorically say that millennials are any particular way, because every time somebody tried to say that about me, it bothered me. Mm-hmm. They tried to shoehorn me into one particular category. Mm-hmm. I don't like that, whether it's the conservative, whether it's the, whatever, the off-grid. People hear that word off-grid and they assume I got a beard down to my nipples and I shower on Thursdays, right. And so it's like...
Once a month, too.
Yeah, it's just like... anyway, so my philosophy, plumbing put the food on the table. Plumbing was... I wasn't passionate about plumbing, but I was good at it. And I made good money. I don't know a plumber. If I get asked to come and speak, I've been asked to come and speak to a shop class. And part of it's terrifying because you're just like, these kids are still moldable. They're still influenceable. And there's an aspect of it where I don't like that responsibility, but at the same time, I feel like, if somebody could come to me when I was 15 or 16, right. If I go back and do high school again, I probably would have tried baseball instead of basketball. I've always wondered, could I pitch, whatever. I definitely would have tried golf, played golf, but it's sure. But I would have spent more time in the shop classes. I would have spent more time. I would have taken auto mechanics and all that stuff. But the thing that I think the disconnect happens with people is, look, the plan A was the plumbing company because I was good at plumbing. I had the clientele to feed my family, to keep my wife home. When we started having kids, that was a deal we made. As long as kids are at home, mom stays home.
Mom stays home. Okay.
And if we,
it's a good deal.
Yeah, and if that requires, that we downsize, if that requires that we live a certain way, then I felt that was a worthy cause. Cedar was training to be a loan officer. When she got pregnant, she probably would have made more money than
especially in that time.
But the first kid, nobody's going to love our kids.
That's exactly right.
The way that the mother's going to love. And Cedar was always passionate about being a mom and passionate about being a homemaker. And she, by the way, she ran the plumbing company. She ran the HR, the office side, and she was very good.
It takes somebody behind the scenes like that to do that.
Yep. There's no way I'd have been belly up.
Too many hats.
Yeah, and the numbers stuff. I'll go smash my fingers all day long, but to take time to call the accountant, you gotta be kidding me. Anyway, but I was always ambitious about again, I've never had an ambition about being a millionaire. I could care less about that term, but I've had ambitions about separating the idea that I got to send you money on the 15th of every month because you carried the mortgage or whatever it is, or the fact that I got to send you money to keep the lights on or to keep all these things. Again, it's the older brother complex where I'm tired of somebody telling me
what to do.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and so somewhere along the way, I'm like, there's got to be. I don't know where it's at, but I never stopped looking. In my 20s, in my early 20s, 23, 24, I was introduced to day trading, and I spent hours and hours and hours trying to understand. And again, this is the tech stock. Yep. You throw a dart, and you're going to get something. And I watched friends of mine make tons, and I watched friends of mine lose tons. We've never been broke, but we've never been rich. And there's part of me that wonders if I had gone belly up somewhere in those early days, if I'd be a little further down the road now. But,
who knows?
Yeah, but and then in my early 30s, when the market softened up, I took an interest in annuities. I went and got licensed to sell. Got my life and health and to sell annuities. The guy that was my management broker in Scottsdale was like the highest paid annuity broker in the West. He made $11 million a year or something like that. And I'm like, well, maybe that's my avenue. Maybe finance. Maybe I'll get my securities. And maybe that's where I'm going. And so I would travel. I'd go put on a day plumbing. And by the way, we were always remodeling. I was always building a car or building a hot rod.
Or something going on at night.
Yeah, it's like, if I have a curse, if I do have a curse, I can't shut the brain off. It's like the brain's just going and going and going and going. And
so you can't sit in front of a television for more than a 20-minute stint of some sort.
If it's educational, right? If it's like if I'm learning something. That's what I search out. The documentary I watched. Have you guys seen Free Solo yet?
Third time I've heard about it in 3 days, though. I haven't seen it yet.
Dude, I watched that last night. I couldn't stop watching it, and I don't know. Yeah, it's just a little bit intense. But
I got that same problem. My brain doesn't shut off. The TV to me is just a big, huge distraction to what's more important, and I get it.
We turned off cable 10, 12 years ago at least. We have Netflix or whatever, but I somewhere along the way I learned that the stuff that goes in my ears and the stuff that I'm feeding the brain. Number one, I suppose I have bouts of depression. I'm sure I do, and so I think feeding healthy stuff is a huge part of that. Mm-hmm. I've always been really active. I've always been fairly healthy that way. I've always been, I guess. I try to be conscious about what I'm putting in my mouth, but I just, again, back to this idea, the system, and it's like, I don't want to be that beans, bullets, and Band-Aids guy, but the system that says that, you're going to live in this subdivision You're going to pay this HOA fee. You're going to get a new truck every 3 years.
Right.
You're going to be like every other contractor and put a 6-inch lift on your truck and 20-inch wheels and spend money you don't have really
on that stuff.
Yeah.
And you're going to
that you never make back.
There's going to be debt that you're going to continue to have to pay. And yeah, that was.
I was young, but I think I also wanted acceptance from my brothers. I didn't take the same path that my brothers did. I was a knucklehead. Thank goodness my wife, recognized she's looking for a project like I look for old projects on the horizon.
How's the project coming along, by the way? She said not very well.
She's fighting a losing battle. But
yeah, you can put those on if you want, so we can all hear you.
There's something in there where I wanted the acceptance of my brothers.
Sure.
I think I made more decisions. We were raised in a very conservative home. My parents were very, again, we're multi-generational conservative LDS, worst thing my dad ever did, growing up was, fart against the wind. He just was, he was so disciplined and he was so rigorous with his, I get up at 5:30 every morning, regardless of what time I go to bed. I play basketball 3 days a week. He just had this discipline.
Very regimented.
Yeah. And he was 35, 36, I think, when I was born. And by the time I'm 15, when I was 11 years old, they figured out he had myelofibrosis, which is I suppose it's a type of cancer that was from an overexposure to radiation. It's very common with survivors of like Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Right.
And they think down at Utah State that back in the 60s, they were playing around with radiation like it was, like it was candy.
Trying to learn about it then, yeah.
Yeah, so I, 11 years old, my mom and my family, we all sit down around the family table, and my dad wouldn't talk about it. He was that typical, just.
Oh yeah.
And my mom's like, I got to go back to college. I got to go finish my degree. Their dad may not be around much longer, and so somewhere in that mess, my dad was still incredibly active in his serving in his callings in the church. Mm-hmm. So he was never home. He put in 40 to 50 hours a week at the school, 40 to 50 hours a week as a bishop, as all that stuff.
Right.
He was never home. My mom's now going to college. We think my dad has 2 years to live, mm-hmm. and so me and my little brother, we were do whatever you want, and I don't ever remember a time thinking, I wish my mom or dad was here, and they weren't there, but I don't think they were around, because the places that we went, my kids would never go. Right. My mom's thinking, how do we survive this? If my husband's gone in a couple of years, I got to have an income stream. And my dad just flat wouldn't talk about it. He would not talk about it. He still looked fine. He was still super active with basketball, and I played ball with him 3 days a week, and we called noon ball.
You couldn't tell.
No, he still moved fine, and probably in his late 50s, somewhere right in there. First of all, he'd lived longer than he should have, and they didn't know why. And somewhere in that time, his bones were turning solid, so he had no bone marrow, and so his spleen gets enlarged. His spleen's doing, triple time what.
Right.
And somewhere in the middle of that, they're like, we got to take your spleen out, and basically from this point on, your blood transfusions, you're going to be on blood transfusions. Yeah. So they take his spleen out, and it's like 5-6 times larger than it should have been. And he never had blood transfusions. He never had to have blood. I mean, this is the guy that gardened, worked outside, he didn't drink soda. I could probably count on two hands how many times I saw him drink a root beer.
Right.
That discipline, and he was older. By the time I'm 15 years old, he's in his 50s, and I assume he was just built this way, right? Mm-hmm. I don't have the foresight to go, this is a lifetime of experience that has molded in self-discipline, that's turned into self-control, self-discipline, self-mastery, all that stuff. And somewhere in that mess, I just assume that's how I'm supposed to be at 15, and I'm going, well, There is no way in hell. There's just no way. So why try? So that's my philosophy.
Okay.
So the wheels came off when I was probably in that 15, somewhere in that age. I just didn't know where I fit in. I didn't feel comfortable around all the Mormon kids. I didn't, the kids I felt comfortable around were the kids that were smoking and drinking and partying, and they didn't pass judgment on me. And I still dressed like I'm the preppy Mormon kid or whatever. But deep down in me, I think I probably, somewhere in that time frame, I figured out my dad calf roped when he was a kid, and he was good. He was really good. We went down to Mexico. My sister married a guy from the Mexican colonies down there, and we went down there for a big celebration. And my brother-in-law Kelly's dad, Max, took my dad out to one of the ranches, and Max knew that my dad knew how to rope. And I'm literally like 14, 15. I see my dad do things I've never seen him do before.
Jump up on a horse and rope. And
not just jump up on a horse and rope, but he was good. And you could tell he was refined and he had skills. And I'm just like,
he took that same philosophy of life into everything he did. And so he mastered that.
But I'm just like, why don't I know about,
Right. How did I not know this?
My dad never liked horses. He looked at horses like you're not going to butcher that horse in a year. What are you going to do with it? You're going to feed that horse? What's it going to do for you? That's kind of his philosophy. And so, I guess in high school there is when somewhere, I'm a year older than my wife. So my junior year, I think, was the first time I met her, but we didn't start dating until after high school. So she saw me going through all that mess, trying to be accepted by somebody.
Yeah.
And the drug thing, thank goodness, didn't stick. It was one of those things where it was, again, something that was done because I thought it's what the cool kids did. Yeah. And there was just no governor. That, I guess if I look back, I left home. My parents were like, the example you're setting for your siblings, we can't have it. But I'm, 15, and so I just take off, pack up, whatever, take off. My dad would come get me every couple of weeks and bring me home, and that went on for a while. And somewhere in that mess, I'm like, all right, the drug stuff's not for me. That's
doesn't work.
Yeah, but boozing, and then I literally move in with I'm like 17. I move in with a bunch of guys that are older than me. They're 20, 21. Somebody's got a somebody's legal, and it was just every Friday night. It was every night of the week, and so that lasted. But the irony is, I always had a job. I always showed up.
You still had some internal compass that kept you heading in at least a proper direction to a certain degree.
Yeah, the neural pathways were built.
Yeah,
right.
Well, I mean, look, it's 1 + 1 = 2. If I want something, and that something costs money.
Yeah.
Am I going to go rob a bank, or am I just going to go earn the money?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Some way I got to figure out how to earn the money. And hard work has never, since I was a little kid, hard work, it might be one of the few things I'm good at. And
that was wired.
Never scared of hard work.
Yeah.
No, and then real quick you figure out what your value is in life, and so, my point is with my wife is she saw me going through that mess, and we were friends. I dated her best friend all the way through high school. They're still best friends. They followed us up here 2 years ago. Her best friend, her husband's a good buddy of mine. He's an electrical contractor, and he's kind of helped me through doing my electrical stuff up there. He's a good friend. It's still awkward, I suppose, 20 plus years later.
Yeah.
This is how we're friends,
right?
But there's part of me that goes, I wish, but my wife is loyal. She's incredibly loyal that way, I should say. But we start dating after.
She needs a headset on because what she said was just pretty damn funny.
What'd you say? I'm too busy listening to myself talk here.
I don't like this part.
Put that microphone up next to your mouth here, and I'll get this.
Oh, that's weird.
There you go.
Here's your moment to shine.
Oh gosh, I don't. No,
She said.
I like the back.
She said, "Thank God that something about her taking you that and dealing with all that, not her.
No
something
question.
about that."
No question.
Thank you for taking him. You can have him pretty much. Is what you said.
Cedar's doing me a favor.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and you know, my wife.
Best decision I ever made, though, right?
Keep telling yourself that.
Yeah. You're still a work in progress.
That's right.
You said that already.
You know, I will say this. My wife was that she had all those attributes that I didn't know I was looking for, whether it was the positive outlook on life, it was the outdoors more than anything. They were always camping and fishing and going to the lake. And her dad, I knew, avid, loved to hunt the White Mountain elk up there. You know, her dad bow hunted. Her dad bow hunted before anybody bow hunted. And so there's just something
familiar.
You got one of those?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so again, I have this philosophy that this universal, whatever you want to call it, religious, universal, whatever, there's some laws that just have a tendency to reward the person that doesn't give up. And a lot of that requires the hard knocks and the maybe not the hard knocks as much as just the effort. I refuse to give in to whatever. We start dating. I'm still. I think I just barely moved back home. There was like literally a drive-by shooting that happened on the house that we were living in.
Oh.
And I call my dad like 2 a.m. And I'm like, it's time for me to move home, and he came right over and got me. And so I think I was living at home, but now I'm 18 and my parents are like, so this is kind of post the Anazi thing.
Right.
So I suppose I had matured, but the alcohol, the tobacco, all that stuff, it was never about religion. The decisions I made were never about religion. It wasn't that I was questioning religion. It was that there was an aspect of me that was like, I need to know why my parents are so against these,
all these things. Yeah.
Well, it speaks a lot for how you are. You have to learn on your own, your way.
Yeah, and again, it's not a great, on one side of my family, on my mom's side, her grandfather is about as hillbilly as it gets. Kentucky, moonshine, poverty. You talk about, my grandfather told me one time the first time he ever tasted moonshine was on a scout trip. and he's 11 years old, and he said this was right after the scoutmaster told him they could all go skinny dipping. They all pull out the handle, and so they were Christian. They were Christian, I suppose. I know they were Christian, but they had a different perspective. And so on that side of my family, when my grandfather joined the Mormon church when he was 27, never drank, never smoked again, right? But then on the Skinner side, on my grandpa's 2 older brothers were alcoholics. One of them killed himself. One of them killed his wife and killed himself.
Oh,
and you're talking about we're Scotch Irish. Where there's a long line of booze in the family, right?
Yeah, it's in the genetics almost.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden we're supposed to be, a little bit more refined than that. And so anyway, somewhere in the middle of that, me and Cedar start dating. And she's just like, yeah, you're not real good at that stuff. Either we're just going to be friends and you keep doing what you want to do, or we need to shut this thing down. And I was so invested in her liking me that I quit chewing, quit drinking, and never done it since. And we dated for a couple of years before we got married. But when we first got married, I went to back to this idea that I was always trying to feed the passion, or trying to figure out, what the purpose is, what the passion is. I immediately, her biological father, I say her dad was a general contractor. It's actually her stepdad, but he raised her. Dave is his name. But her biological father was a horseman. His whole family, they were horsemen by definition. You talk about, again, team rope and all that stuff down there in Mesa. They were known for that. We get married. I now want to be a horseman. Okay. My dad's not interested in owning horses.
Been around him when he was a kid, but other than that.
Yeah. There's just,
right.
My dad was one that would say things like, when we bought our first house, I called him up and I'm like, Dad, I'm going to plant a tree in the front yard. What kind of tree should I plant? And he said, well, a tree has to do one of two things. Either it provides shade or it provides fruit. And if it doesn't do one of those two things, I don't plant it. You know, he's like, we had 14.
Pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
He had some philosophies that he was living by, yeah.
We had 14 citrus trees in our backyard. You know, nut trees, apple trees, all that stuff down there in Arizona. I start spending time around Cedar's dad. We buy our first horse. You know, I'm keeping the horse over there at his place. And somewhere in the middle of that, I go to do you guys remember Monty Roberts? You guys remember him? Mm-hmm. He was kind of he called himself the horse whisperer back in the day. Mm-hmm. He got a fascinating story where he was colorblind, severely colorblind. Yep. And he could see distances actually in Nevada, down there in Nevada when they'd round up those Mustangs. Mm-hmm. And he could see things that the average person couldn't see. And he learned this language between horses. And I'm like 21, 22, and I pay $300 to go to one of these seminars one Saturday.
Seminars, yeah.
I go to the seminar, and I wasn't even 22 because Cedar was still pregnant with our oldest daughter. And it's another one of these moments. I see this man work with this horse that anybody with a brain would have put down. And within a half an hour, he's got this horse going in and out of trailers. He's got this horse doing things, and the owner's sobbing.
I've tried everything.
Yeah, and I see this, and I'm like, well, maybe I think this is it. I think this is my calling. And I come home. Of course, I buy every bloody thing he's got on the
on the table,
books, tapes, everything.
When in Rome, right?
Bits, I'm like $400 later, and I come home and I'm like, we're moving to Northern California.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to talk this guy into hiring me and teaching me to be. And I write this letter. I wish my wife would say this letter. I write this letter, and I'm like, I'm going to talk him into. I am his.
He doesn't know it yet, but I am
the best thing that's ever going to happen to this guy. I may not ever make money. But I saw something today that struck a chord in me that I write this whole letter out, and Cedar see that, and she's crying. She's like, who the hell are you? And I don't even know who you are, and
did you hit the bottle while I was
and she I remember calling my dad, and this is where my dad was great. My dad was the sounding board that never ever outright shot holes in my ideas, but he would talk me through them, and he'd help me realize that there were more things. And so I remember calling my dad up, and I'm like, Dad, this is what I'm doing. We're selling, we're moving this. And he's like, Heath, you got to slow down a little bit here. You're now making decisions for you, your wife, and an unborn child, right? You got to. He said, you're done with those. He said, it's time to be a man. It's time to get a job. It's time to make you. If you're mature enough to have a child, if you're mature enough to be married, I was 21, she was 19, we got married. A year later, on Father's Day, we're in the hospital, and she's having a baby, and so it's like, I do remember that moment thinking, I probably shouldn't be a dirtbag so my daughter doesn't hate me,
Right.
But anyway, that, again, trying to feed that passion. And so we always had horses, we always had animals, we'd always have, we'd find a place down there in Mesa, there'd be an acre lot. We'd try to make the best of it. And there were many times where I felt the shoehorn coming out going, well, we could buy that house. We could probably make it work. We could probably, it's what my parents probably think I should do. It's the right thing to do. It's the safe thing to do.
I think that's the key word there.
Yeah. Get the 30-year mortgage. Mm-hmm. Don't try and buck the system, whatever. But it just never felt right. And as we, as I got older, that seemed to come to the surface even more. And I think the best and worst thing that ever happened to me, in a sense, was I was introduced to making money through network marketing. And love it or hate it, I've done it once. I'll never do it again. I tell people that all the time. I've been with the same company almost 9 years. I was 33 when I'm still. I get licensed to sell annuities. I sell one annuity. I make a $12,000 commission in 4 hours worth of work. And I called the management broker, and I said, I'll never sell another one. And he F-bombed me and cussed me up one side and down the other, and he said, you do what I tell you to do. If you listen to me, you'll be a millionaire. And this guy was on his fourth marriage, kids all over the country, had a garage full of Ferraris, but there was something in me that goes, I don't think that's it.
Yeah, maybe he's not the right example.
But it's not the money. I mean, his values didn't align with your values.
I didn't believe in what I was doing.
Clearly. Yeah,
I didn't believe. It's not that annuities or even, I did not believe in what I was doing. His philosophy was you shove them down people's throats. You don't question things. You do whatever.
Right.
And then I think it was, and then in the middle of that, I've got a friend that's a border patrol agent on the northern border in Montana, and I'm just like, and my cousin Terrell, it's always me and him knocking heads trying to. He's still a police officer at that time, and Terrell's like, hey, we're moving to Montana. We're going to move up there. You guys should come with us. And we've always kind of done things together. He'd buy a piece of land. I'd buy a piece of land. He'd buy the one next to it. And so I begged Cedar to consider this for like 4 months. And finally, Cedar's like, if we're going up there, let's go up there in January, February, whatever it was. She's like, let's go see what this... And then we'd lived in Snowflake, and we thought we had seen
winter.
Cold.
Right. You knew what cold was,
yeah. And we fly up there, northern Montana, Conrad, Montana, and I'm like, well, this is completely different.
Oh yeah,
doors.
It's a different winter.
Doors froze, closed. I mean, it's just a whole different perspective. And then on the way home, I was never more certain that wasn't for us. That was one of the few times in my life where I was just like,
no,
that ain't it.
Yeah.
And the ironic part is my buddy has since moved back to Arizona, but we were always, I was always looking. I don't want to lump my wife into some of my crazy ideas, but it's so I get introduced to this concept of residual income through network marketing, and I'm not going to get into it, but within a short period of time, I was making more money doing that than I was with the plumbing company. But I had so much negative, again, from the family, from the brothers. Right. I had so much of the negative where people are just going, oh, yeah, those things don't work.
It comes along with all the network marketing things, all the negativity.
Yeah, but then on the other side, I would go to these events, and I would hear from some of the highest paid motivational speakers in the world. And I have my opinion about these guys. I don't care for them, but I read all the books.
Yeah,
I read all these books, and I'm trying to... and the more I dove into this, the more I, again, just believed that settling was not a verb I was going to use in my life. I didn't. My ambition was to buy a working ranch, was to buy a ranch. Whether the idea of buying the old family ranch was always romantic, but it probably wasn't going to happen. And it's a miserable place to ranch. The truth is, it's a hard place to ranch over there. But that was the ambition. And my dad never, ever said, don't do that. He had never even dabbled in multi-level marketing, network marketing, because he was always quite concerned about the way people would
perceive him.
Well, he was always in high callings in the church and all that stuff, and so he was always concerned about that. But when I called him and I went over everything with his company, and he looked at me, he's like, look, if you're going to do it, do it. Don't either do it or don't do it. Don't dabble. Right. And within 6-7 months, we were doing really well, and then we hung on to the plumbing company another year after that. And when we sold the plumbing company, and all of a sudden my time is completely mine, supposedly, right? You own your own time. That's the theory. That's
right.
What you hear. That's a double-edged sword. And somebody like me, too much time is not good.
You need to be busy.
And if you don't have the foresight to keep yourself busy, you can fill that void with hollow things. You can only take so many fishing, hunting trips, or maybe I shouldn't even. That's probably not the good analogy, because I could do a lot of that. But it's like you can only go and buy and sell, and so many things. But I think there's still a purpose. I didn't know what my purpose was, but as I began to interact with people, and then I got into a leadership position in this company, where I had to teach and train and speak in front of thousands of people, and there were parts that I loved and parts that I hated, because I think people are so quick to put people on a pedestal.
Right.
And they're so quick, and this is why, back to the YouTube thing, people are so quick to assume certain things about certain people, and that's terrifying. Number one, I don't want that burden of responsibility that comes with I'm still human. I make mistakes.
Right.
I'm often.
I still have bad days. I still. Yep.
Yeah.
I try to be positive. I think I try to stay away from the negative stuff as much as I can. But I'm human, man, and I. So I guess I got skeptical. I love that industry for what it taught me. There was no way as a plumber that I would be driving down the road listening to the books,
Right.
learning the things that I learned. There was no other way in my life that I would have learned those things that introduced me to this thing called residual income. And there's lots of different ways to get residual income. It can be,
Right.
it should be difficult, frankly, but what that did is that facilitated this where we are now. Okay, none of this exists. The Red Poppy Ranch does not exist if I have a 40 to 50 hour a week business.
Yeah, just you don't have the time.
There's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way humanly possible. I have
And as an owner of a business, 40 or 50 hours,
right.
more like 80, and then it's 24/7. You run a business, you're 24/7.
You know,
That's just the way it is.
I paid when we started our own plumbing company. I paid like $3,500 to go do the Dave Ramsey's. He calls it entree leadership.
Yeah.
And this was like right when he was starting it back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I paid that money to go learn. I wanted to learn. We've always been fans of his. Kind of that, stay out of debt, save your money.
Yeah, yeah.
Crock pot, long term. There's no quick. Typically if it looks too good to be true, it probably is.
Yep.
I sat through 3 days of training with him, and I realized that he really didn't teach me anything that I didn't already know. He didn't. He maybe compounded the things that my grandparents that had lived through the Depression,
Right.
that ended up with hundreds of thousands of dollars in assets and wealth because they were conservative. And because they just, my grandfather, he's the hillbilly from whatever,
Kentucky.
Hazard County, whatever it was. I think that's what it is back there.
Yeah.
And he rode the trains during the Depression, back and forth across the country looking for work. He worked, at the Boulder Dam. He watched men die.
Yeah.
Quit the job next day. Said, I'm not dying. Here, gets another job. Ends up again being very, very well educated, master's degree. Ends up being a principal at schools, but takes that money, socks it away, invests in some apartments, real estate, dies a wealthy man. So, somewhere in the middle of all this, I guess, is like, the passion, whatever that passion is, whether it's, I don't care what it is. There's such a movement of people working with their hands. Mm-hmm. These craftsmen, that word craftsman, I love that word. Tradesmen, I love, my 15-year-old son, we talk about what's he going to do with his life?
What's he like? Yep.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to burden him with the pressures of making those decisions, but he likes to weld. And I'm like, I know a lot of welders make a lot of money.
Exactly right.
And so.
Well, and that's the things that I try to do with my kids too, and it sounds like you do is, you've got to make a living at it, but find something you're passionate, you like to do. You got to like what you're doing. I learned the hard way. I don't like civil engineering. I just don't. I do it. I'm particularly good at it. Like you said, you weren't particularly passionate about plumbing, but you were good at it. And after listening to you and the things you've gone through and what you're doing now is, you probably it's not really that it was plumbing. Yeah, you might not like that too much, but what you loved was the challenge of taking something, being somewhat of a salesman, being somewhat of a someone told me I can't do it, so I'm going to.
Sure.
And you wrap all those things up, and I try to tell my kids the same thing. I'm like you. I did go to college. I went to Utah State, graduated from Utah State, and
excellent.
But school is you don't have to go to school. See, I was brought up you have to go to school.
Right.
My dad was, you're going to college. You got to go to college. You got to college. It was always in me. I'm going to college. It didn't matter. College was it. So, but the way things are going as you talk now, it's you got to do what you like to do. You got to see long term to say, look, I can do this for 20, 30 years and be happy doing these kind of things. I can excel at this. This is fun. and things might change through your life. But when you're talking about your 15-year-old and loves to want to be a welder. We need welders.
We need to say that some of it's going away. Some of that,
so some
being
of
able
that
to
talent
work with their hands is going away.
But I like that philosophy. It's just it's one of those things that I think has changed. My generation, and probably some of yours, you were probably pushed a little to go to school to a certain degree, or you felt like you had to satisfy.
There was a time when I felt that I was a lower class citizen. Yes, because I didn't have a 4-year degree hanging on the wall, and then I watched a bunch of my friends go to college, and in some cases get degrees and not even use their degrees in the direction they went. I watched another one of my buddies go through college, going to law school. He was up here. Where was he at? I don't know if he's up at Idaho State or anywhere. He couldn't pass the bar. He could not pass the bar. Has a nervous breakdown. Has a nervous breakdown in the middle of this. It damn near kills him. Mm-hmm. Has to get on medication. Still can't pass the bar. The end result is he's gone back to work for his dad's company. Got $200,000 in student loans.
School debt.
Right.
Yeah, and so, number one, I don't think a 19 to 21-year-old kid has the common sense to be making decisions, to be wrapped with that kind of debt. I don't, this European thing of going backpacking and going whatever for a year or two after graduation or before whatever, there's probably something to that, is doing something with your life before, you're trying to harness yourself with, even at 24 and 25 years old, I don't, they say the frontal cortex is still growing into our mid-20s, but, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of the things that I'm not a conspiracy theory per se, but I'm just skeptical of everything. If they're telling me why, if you're telling me not to do this, why? And it goes back to maybe even my parents, and there's an aspect of what I'm doing up there with our place that, there's probably the people locally that know what's going on. There's probably half of them that are going, yeah, it'll be cool, but it's probably going to be a summer place.
Right.
And then there's another half of them that I shouldn't say half. I assume that everybody's sitting around watching our videos. I don't think that's hardly the case, but
100,000 people are.
Well, anyway, I think there's a lot of people, or a handful of people that are going. There's a couple of jackasses from Arizona up there that don't know what they're in for, and so there's a part of that where I'm just going, well, I don't care if it kills me. Yeah, and it very easily could. I mean,
sure, but
we're going to figure this thing out.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way during this journey, it has turned into the most fulfilling thing, aside from being a husband and a father, right? Mm-hmm. It has turned into, this, and I'm not, YouTube has not validated that.
Well, maybe that answers the question that started here when you were talking about what you thought the YouTube thing was going to do, and then we've talked all, and I think we maybe answered what it actually has done now, and maybe you can touch on that just a little bit, because you just hit it again with the YouTube that we've gone down a bunch of rabbit holes in your life and all the philosophies and everything that where you sit today and your family. So talk about now what that difference you think is.
Well, I guess if I could, when this thing started 3 years ago, we were trying to borrow $180,000, somewhere around there, to build this, and part of this was around a TV show. Okay, we had pressures, we had deadlines from a TV show.
Yeah. So what happened there? You got with that production company. You decided to go forward with that.
Yeah, I signed a contract with them. We went forward, and not with that. The first one, it was a different one. Actually, one out of Montana, and the executive producer talked me into it. And real quick, as we're going around town being filmed, real quick, I could tell people were not into this. This is. I'm not going to say the name of the movie because I'll give away right where we're at.
Everybody would know.
Yeah, but this is not the first rodeo with camera crews wandering around and stuff. And so there was, I think, this is where we live here. I tell people all the time, Idaho is the best kept secret in the country. Idaho, in general, is the best kept secret in the country. But you better be up to what it's going to throw at you. You know, the winters, and especially eastern Idaho and southeastern Idaho. And, you know, somebody tried to tell me that this area is the banana belt of Idaho. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? I got 4 feet of snow on my property right now.
And it's 10 below.
Yeah. And, but as far as beauty, as far as living in a place, I've never been anywhere, and I've traveled. I've never lived anywhere where I spend more time doing this,
just looking around,
just
enjoying,
you know, and the nature thing. I'm not going to get off on a religious tangent here, but the more time I spend in the woods, the easier it is for me to understand the creator aspect of it. And
well, think about this: you did that for 3 months at the school, Anazi School, but at 19 years old, 18, 19 years old, you don't have the same. Even though it hit you. Now it hits you differently because you've got family, you've got wisdom, you've got
the maturation process.
Yeah,
helps.
So it probably does the same thing, but just at a different level for you.
Yeah, I suppose my objective is to, you know, I'm not trying to force any lifestyle down my kids' throats at all. But if I had one goal in this whole thing, it would be for when my kids grow and leave the house, for them to hunger to come back home, right?
Yeah.
Wherever they live, and hopefully they're not too far away. But for them to go, dang it, Dad, I'm coming home.
Yeah,
you guys got room for us. And the irony, as you know, our YouTube journey has been a lot like our network marketing journey, where in the beginning there's a lot of people going,
yeah, wait,
good luck. Huh?
Yeah,
they're going to see. Wait to see if you succeed or not first. Yeah,
and then, you know, I don't know why I have to be that way. The measuring stick. It's always family too. It's like families. You know, anyway. You know, there's an aspect of this that when you have however many subscribers that you have, it validates something on some level, right? When you throw a video up and you know a certain number of people are going to watch it on some level, you go, well, look. So, I mean, look, it's somebody out there, you know, and so, you know, it's probably not the healthiest place to live your life from. And I've tried to, you know, I don't want to be an angry, bitter, that makes a person that makes decisions based on trying to prove somebody wrong, right?
That's not the way to be.
But
at the same time, the house is what gets you out of bed every day. Now you
do have purpose.
He does have purpose, and it's in his blood. He loves it, and it's fun to see him working so hard at something that he loves. And he can't wait to finish. And he's not going to sell it when he's done. There's no way I'm letting this one get sold.
It's like your plumbing or your gas inspector.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I there's just some things that are more important than money, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. You know, again, I don't ever want my kids. You know, we have standards in our house. We have expectations. I wish I was a little bit more refined, and I wish I was maybe a little slower to get my back up about things. And maybe I wish I was, you know, in a small town, when you're not from that small town, that's not a great attribute to have, right? You know,
it's hard to break into.
You're the intruder, you're the outsider, you're the this, and it's not like you move into a neighborhood and you meet your neighbors and 3 weeks later you're having barbecues. Here it's
people are I'm not saying that. People are very genuine and very loving. I've never lived anywhere where, you know, when we first moved in, more people would just stop and talk. And I'm waiting for people to ask me for money or something.
Yeah,
right, because you're not used to it.
30 minutes later, I'm going, oh, they saw that we have an Arizona license plate. They said, oh, and still to this day, you know, I believe people in Idaho, and it's not just exclusive to Idaho, but I'm going to pretend it is because this is where I live. Mm-hmm. There is a genuine, there's a hardworking, give you the shirt off your back. When things go bad, there's not a better place to be as far as rallying around.
Right.
When we pulled in with our U-Haul, there was 20 or 30 people at our house waiting to unload.
They heard we had teenage daughters. That's what that was.
No, we had our U-Haul unloaded in an hour.
Three trailers, whatever it was.
Right.
It took us 3 days to load it up. And
yeah.
45 minutes later, you know, it's just like
it's unloaded.
Yeah, and so.
But you have that faction of the small town folks that are just outside of your touch.
Sure.
That have that. I don't know about these guys kind of a feel, because in the small town, you everything is noticed, right?
It's definitely magnified.
Yeah, and so in a bigger city, you can slide under the radar, doing all this, and nobody even cares or thinks twice about it. So there's a level of responsibility, or tag whatever word you want, when you move into a small town, that you're watched a little bit more.
And I guess back to the TV deal, I never would have done that. I never, if I go back and do things
that
over.
was something you can do over. I was going to ask, was there anything you would do differently?
Yeah, I never would have done it.
So did you
wouldn't have touched it.
cut
We've had
off,
offers. Yeah, they still technically owe us quite a bit of money. We still, from time to time, get offers. But the thing about YouTube, love it or hate it, there's 1 billion hours a day spent on YouTube consuming something, right? People are so burned out on the reality TV. Every network is dying. The top shows, the gold rushes, these top shows are not going up. They're all, so Discovery and these big channels are reinvesting in the big shows, and they're taking on less and less small shows. The Scripps Network, which owns HGTV, DIY, all the they just sold out to Discovery.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, so they sold out, and HGTV was originally, that was the platform that we were supposed to be on, and I felt like that was the closest to being genuine,
because the show was going to be about you guys taking a raw piece of land and doing and
it was kind of the story
building up. Was it? Did it have an off-grid aspect to it?
That's all it was about.
It was all okay.
It's supposed to be the off-grid angle,
and because we had a family, because we had 5 kids, and people don't do that with 5 kids,
right?
And our kids go to public schools. We're advocates for public schools. For the moment, my
just because
parents
I'm not patient enough to teach. We'd be off what is it? What's the word? Field trips. That's what we'd be doing every
field
day.
trips every week.
People automatically assume, they hear the word off-grid, oh, you're one of those, you're homeschooling. I'm like, nah, I don't like my kids that much.
But our kids also are older, and they have tons of friends, and to just up and leave. I mean, they go to school to be social too, kind of like how I was. But
so that means we've got that 2.5 miles of road every day.
Yeah,
every day. During the school season, the kids have to get in and out. And so my junior in high school, the goal is that she'll likely drive all the kids in, something along those lines. So now I have to make sure that road is good enough for my daughter.
For a daughter
year
to drive
round.
Yeah, and so there's definitely easier ways to be unique if unique's the goal. I mean, I tell people regularly, you got to be about half stupid to do what we're doing up there, to start from the ground level on a hillside property. We own our property's like a slice of pizza. We own almost 3/4 of a mile back. I don't even know. I get back about 600, 800 feet, and you can't tell where you're at. It's one side of our property that we had surveyed, and I took the excavator and kind of cleaned that up. So I've got one side. This summer we'll do the other side, and the long-term plan is to have, trails and stuff
all through it.
And then I even want to put a little deer camp up there, because I know there's a spot where the deer like to hang out, but what's the word? The unknown aspect of that property versus the other 40 acres that we were looking at. I could see from the door of my truck, see everything.
Yeah.
Still 40 acres, but it didn't have whatever the curiosity, whatever that is in the brain, where you're just like, I think I could do this there. There's
a challenge.
The new frontier all the time.
Almost. Yeah. And so anyway, I guess again, I think the mission statement that YouTube is a beautiful thing. Okay, it's a beautiful thing for somebody like me. That's too hard to work with for a production company to follow around or whatever it is, because I don't want to spin the story in a way that's whatever.
Yeah.
So and then really the way that I shoot, I don't like talking on camera. I don't like, and if I figured out early on real quick that people were more interested in me doing something.
What you were doing, not what you were saying.
Yeah. And I still, there's only like 2 YouTube channels that I go to regularly, and they're both basically that same style, where it's stuff being done.
Sure. And I was going to ask it, because your style is unique. And I think, honestly, the story you tell is every bit as good as a production company would have done. Not better because we know it's honest and real, right?
Yeah.
But I think you've hit something there that works with people. I mean, it does for me. I mean, we watch them every day. You put them up.
We appreciate that. I don't know how to react to a lot of this stuff, right? You know, we've sold hundreds of hats, hundreds and hundreds. And it's like, what kind of, I'm not going to use the R word on here, but what kind of is going to wear, we've sent hats with an American flag and a poppy on it outside of the U.S., all over the world. And I'm just like, I don't get it. But it's like, you know, and so part of this is my brain trying to understand what's happening. And part of it is really, there's an artistic side to this, that there's an expressive, like, you know, I don't lay in bed thinking about doing drywall. I don't. I lay in bed thinking about, you know, doing the rock wall on the hill and the gardening and the building the shop and building in the, you know, I get an email probably every day or two where somebody's like, are you going to stop your YouTube channel when the house is done? I'm like, bro, I get along just fine with the camera. I think we got lots of projects to do. And so,
and say, what was your vision for the next 5 to 10 years up there?
You know, it's turned into something that people want. We try it on one hand. I don't want people to know where it's at.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we want people to share this with us because that's what it's turned into. It's gone from being a bad idea to being this thing that is so rewarding that other people are going, you know, I don't let people up there with me very often. Number one, I guess there's a little bit of a fear of somebody going and hitting their leg with a chainsaw or something like that. But give me a break. I mean, but the other side of it is I don't work well with people if I don't know a person's skill set.
Right.
And the dude shoots me an email and says, hey, I'll come help you hang drywall. Well, when I'm working, I want to work. Okay.
Even
I don't feel...
Even with me and bringing the kids up there after like an hour, he's like, okay, you can go.
Time to go.
No, you know what? I took the kids up there last week. If I'm trying to work and only work, then it bothers me that I'm that way with the kids. I want, you know, my oldest son, he's figured that out and we work good together.
Yeah.
But my 5-year-old son, he's karma for having one more kid is what he is. But but they just want to play and they want to go. And so you know, last weekend Cedar was out of town, and so I took him up there and I'm like, I'm not going to work. We're just going to play around.
But you did a great job with the maple tree thing.
Yeah, it was a blast.
See, and they were doing their thing. And from the video, it looked it was a great way to get you to do something with them. Yeah. With that mindset that you have about gotta work.
Yeah.
I don't want my kids to hate that place because I make them work so much. But I want them, like my 8-year-old daughter Callie, all she talks about is, you know, are we going to have goats? Are we going to have, you know, and we go down the list of animals. I'm like, look, if you want to, I don't care. We'll have whatever. But you are going to feed them, or, you know, you're going to, the responsibilities that come with this stuff. And so, you know, I suppose the 5 to 10 year, I mean, I don't even look past next Friday half the time with my projects. But at the same time, you know, we'll build this, we'll finish our shop. I have to have a shop. About the car thing. Mm-hmm. I spend way too much time looking at cars that I shouldn't have. And I, you know, my theory is I'll work on the house when the sun's out. I'm going to go in the garage at night and build a truck or something.
Plus, all his tools have overtaken my house, so we need a shop ASAP.
And the shop is number one. Get that shop done, and what we'll probably do in that shop is probably put 4 bedrooms somewhere in there that friends and family can come and stay.
And have a place for them to crash out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
be a part of it all the time.
Yeah, good.
From Arizona, just people come through all the time, but we have company every weekend, almost in the summer. So it'll be good.
You know, we've got nephews. There's an aspect of this, kind of like the Anazi thing was to me. There's an aspect of this when people get up there. It doesn't matter how much snow's on the ground right now. It's a magical place in the sense that you don't want to leave.
Right.
Oh boy, I know that.
Right. My nephews come up there and they're just like, Uncle Heath, I'm coming back in the summer. I'm coming back to, and I'm like, well, if you want to work, we're going to work, and this is what we're going to do. We're coming to work. My nephew my sister's son from down in Mexico, he'll be here in a few weeks, and he'll probably stay till fall. And so I want people to participate in that, but the overwhelming objective is to figure out how to live sustainably up there, and to figure out how to intertwine our lives with nature and raise our food, raise our whatever.
And teach our kids to work. That's kind of the biggest thing that we have.
Yeah, take your time.
Teach them to be outside. Because like you said, I grew up outside. My parents were divorced, so my biological dad and my stepdad, they're both total outdoorsmen. And I had 4 brothers too, so I was like one of the boys, just grew up outside.
Right.
So that's what I want my kids to do. I want them to be outside. I'd much rather them be doing that than playing video games.
Gaming.
Or
Yeah.
So it makes it real easy for you to understand that lifestyle and how to do it.
Oh, totally.
You feel comfortable in the mountains. You feel like you belong in the mountains.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. I went to Las Vegas with my friend for her daughter's dance competition like a month ago, and I was just like, ugh, get me out of this, too many people. It's just, it's just too many lights, too many people. So it's good to go visit and had fun, but I'd like to come home to the peace and quiet. And
everybody goes to Vegas and pays the state taxes on the machines at the tables. Get their their couple of days worth of getting that out of their system, and having a little bit of fun, whatever they're doing, and then going back home. We did a podcast with a guy who we talked about getting kids out and what it does for them and the skills they learn about problem solving and things like that when their phone's not attached to their face. You know what I mean? And it's doing that is priceless for teaching.
Just the old-fashioned fun. Like the kids are like, we're bored. What are we going to do? I'm like, go jump on the 4-wheeler. Go do something.
Go burn up the road on it. Whatever you need to do.
Go climb a tree. Go look for animals over there.
And I can tell you guys, it's when you talk about someplace where your kids want to come back to or be. So we've had our property not much longer than you guys have yours. January of 16.
Okay.
And our daughter's 28 now. Our son's 25. Our daughter's 28. But I never was so proud. Is on an Instagram. She called it her happy place. Oh. So be ready for that, because it's it'll get you.
That's neat. It is your happy place. There's something about. They said that like little kids, they used to run around barefoot on the ground, and they were happy when you were a little kid. When you're outside, you're happy. And then as we get older, we keep our shoes on, we stay inside, and we get unhappy and we get sick. They're like, even old people, take off your shoes. Like when you're at the beach, when your feet are in the sand, you're happy, right?
Right.
It's kind of the same thing
there's
as
a whole
in
different.
The mountains that
there's something for the reason for that.
Yeah. Get out and then you'll be happy.
And it is your happy place. Getting up there and doing those things, I understand completely. Yeah.
Our daughter just had announced to us she's having our first grandchild.
Oh, fun.
Oh, wow.
And she made us a sign that said, the happy place is at my cabin, or at our cabin, and then underneath it says, with Grandma and Grandpa.
Yeah.
Aww.
So perfect.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How cute.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's exciting. We hope that, like Heath said, that right now it's all about work. Whenever they go up there, it's, we got to work. But hopefully.
It'll turn around.
It's like,
That'll,
don't feel like you have to work, but, we're going to work on this project, and everybody's in on it.
Right.
Within a couple hours.
Good, you can play.
and it gets everybody a sense of pride too when they go up there later. It's
ownership and being involved. And I think we've got the emails that I get from people from all over the world. From whether it's the UK or Israel or wherever it is, and people are just like, look, I'm not in a position to do what you do, but the fact that you're willing to put this up, you have to understand that it fills a void in my life.
Sure, they're kind of living vicariously almost.
Yeah, and so there's a little bit of, I've tried. There's been moments when you don't feel good, it's hard to make a positive video, right? and so there's been moments where I go back every once in a while. I go back through videos, and mysteriously a few of them disappear because it's not my proudest moment, right? And so some of these I like to get rid of. But what's happened now is a lot of the people that are getting invested in what we're doing are going back to the beginning, and they're watching all 300 videos, and so, I guess in conclusion, I guess if I had to wrap up and give somebody advice about the whole YouTube thing, about the whole social media, number one, I don't have Facebook on my phone. Haven't had Facebook on my phone in years. I try to remove, I use Instagram with Red Poppy Ranch, but I don't watch the news. I haven't watched the news in years and years and years.
Good.
I don't consume, even Facebook is so, the algorithms, they're trying to feed us things that I think are causing this contention in this divisiveness that I don't believe in. I don't believe in that. Right. I believe that there's still room for two different people from two different walks of life to sit down and converse and even debate with courteous and with understanding and with love, and not be so quick to friggin' throw the MAGA hat out or whatever. I don't buy that. I believe we have a lot to be proud of in this great country. I believe there's still tremendous freedoms, and I couldn't do what we're doing anywhere else in the world.
No.
Yeah.
And the double-edged sword with social media. We don't allow, our 19-year-old does whatever she's going to do, and she lets me know.
She's her father's daughter.
Yeah, that apple didn't fall far from the tree.
No.
But I don't let our other kids have social media on their phones. We give them phones because up there,
right.
we just switched over to the only network that works up there. So they got phones, but I don't allow them to have none of it. Snapchat, nothing. And we've got their phones locked up enough to where we feel safe. Because in my opinion, especially with young men, having access to the good, bad, and ugly of the internet is dangerous.
Sure it is.
Okay? But even my daughters, for my 17-year-old daughter to think that the world revolves around Snapchat and around these other things, I'm not going to let it happen. Once she's 18, she's paying her own phone bill. She can do whatever she wants. But I'm going to do my part as a parent. If we're responsible enough to have 5 kids, I'm going to do my damnedest to put them out in the world and have them contribute versus being a burden.
That's right.
Right.
And with the right perspective, or a more whole perspective, not just this, electronic device perspective.
The world's a lot bigger than that phone. That's for sure. In a better way.
I hunger for the old ways for some reason. For the old, I listen to almost every night. I listen to sleep or fall asleep listening to some old public domain book. Try to find something about history. I had to give up on some of the pay apps because I was spending too much flipping money on books. But one of my favorite books that I love to listen to is The Boyhood and Youth of John Muir. Okay. And John Muir is automatically connected to an organization, a modern day organization, that I don't believe his philosophies of old align.
Right. I think they've gotten out of touch when they got as big as they are now.
For sure. No question. Matter of fact, I watched that supposed conservation group ravage the White Mountains when they eliminated the ability to log. And then a short time later, we watched 1 million acres burn up in the White Mountains. Okay, of pristine wilderness. Okay, so, but regardless, truth is truth, regardless of the mouth that it comes from. And that book that talks about John Muir's struggle from Scotland to Wisconsin, from Wisconsin, and the time that he spent in the Sierra Nevadas, is like, in the way he writes, the way he his journals, it speaks to my soul, right?
Sure. So
that's the stuff that I listen to. I'm not interested in some Fox News or I'm as conservative. What does that mean? I'm as conservative as anybody is, in the sense that I want my kids to grow up in a safe place, in a country that has an economy that allows them to go out and determine what their worth is.
Right.
Sure. It's about that simple, and I don't, I guess, but if I had a mission statement, I would tell people to figure out what your worth is in this world and get it, but do it in a way that's fulfilling. And if the day job isn't fulfilling, then do something in the evenings, whether it's serving others. And I've never in my life ever spent time helping somebody else that I regretted, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
that's for sure.
Services
Yeah.
is very rewarding.
That is true.
That was my dad's. That was my dad's, mission statement by far. But then this thing that, working, you're never going to work as hard. I used to think the Dave Ramsey philosophy, or we were talking earlier, you're never going to work, or an employee is never going to work as hard for your business as you will. I used to think that way, right?
Yeah.
But after going through, being self-employed, owning your own business, things like that, after going through that, I think there are systems that people can flourish in. I don't. We've considered starting our plumbing company up for a couple of years. I've been in the back of my head going, I should go get my license reactivated in Idaho. If my kids want to try, we went to the point of getting the name registered and all that stuff, but my heart's not in it.
Right.
And financially, I would go back to it in a second if I ever needed to, but I don't feel that that's my purpose is best. Our purpose is best served doing that. And so, the YouTube thing has given me a platform of exposure that I never would have imagined. And so I guess if I had to give somebody some advice, I would be very cautious about the words that come out of your mouth.
Yeah.
Be cautious about what you put out there. Be cautious about who you hook your wagon to. One of the things that was happening to me, I guess, as I was combing through comments is the influence that comes from comments, right? You start asking yourself questions like, well, what do the viewers want to see? What do the subscribers want to see? The second I ask myself that question, I'm done.
Yeah.
Right.
Because what I'm doing up there is fulfilling. We never told our family we were doing this in the beginning. We didn't tell anybody. I had this idea that if it was something they would watch anyway, then they're going to watch it.
Right.
But I'm not going to ask anybody to watch just to help me out, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a desire to create something that makes people feel better at the end of it. That email or that comment does more to get me out of bed when somebody messages and they say that they had a hell of a day, and then just
your video helped me out today or whatever.
Yeah, that 9, 10, 11 minutes of whatever.
He's got a few of those that almost bring you to tears.
Wow.
That have said that. Like,
really?
Yeah, like thank you for inspiring me to get out of bed today. Thank you for wanting me to be a better person. And
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
What more can you ask for?
yeah.
And then there are the people that are going, look, you motivated me to get out and fix the deck, get out and do stuff like that. So whatever that is, but I guess there's this thing that happens at some point with YouTube where you begin to where the outside influence wants to get a piece of it, right? Mm-hmm. I get an email every single day from somebody saying, will you review? We will pay you if you'll do this. Will you do that? And it's hard not to in some cases, especially if it's a product that I think, but to change the style of what we do.
Right.
So we've been very, very picky about who we hook the wagon to.
Partner up with you.
Yeah, and technically there's only a few of them, but the ones that we're connected to, I'll die for, because they've given us, frankly, before we even had credibility, they're taking chances on us, and one of those is New Holland, one of those is I try to find companies that are companies that I would be with anyway, right?
Right. You would have used their bottom and used them regardless.
Yeah, and I don't seek out these companies necessarily, but every once in a while, going through the whole off-grid solar process, trying to figure out inverters, trying to figure out batteries, trying to figure out solar panels. It's like a bunch of horsemen. You put 10 horsemen in a room and you ask them one question, you get 10 different answers. It's almost the same thing with the off-grid world. and I, in the early days when I had the HGTV thing following me around, it brought credibility that all the big names wanted to offer. I mean, I had names, the biggest names in the solar inverter industry are like, look, we'll give you whatever you want. But the way they treated us was so poor that I'm like, I don't care if they ship me a pallet of $50,000 worth of batteries, panels. I said, if they treat me this way, they're only going to treat. How do I get behind somebody like that?
And how are they treating their customers that are giving them money then if they're treating you that way?
And so we passed on that company, and we waited quite a long time, and just recently we partnered with a company called Solarc out of Texas. That's their story's a beautiful story, veteran-owned company. For the first time going through this process, they took time to educate me. And still, along this way, anyway, their story, the humble beginnings of how they started, and they've simplified things in a way. This solar systems have a tendency to be just super complicated, and they simplified things for me in a way that was, and then they're actually more cost effective than a lot of these other companies. But anyway, I guess I would say be cautious about, the other thing with the hats and the T-shirts. We would get these emails constantly from these third-party companies going, look, you don't do anything. You pick a logo. We do everything else. We ship it. We do everything. And I'm like, that'd be so easy not to mess with that.
Right.
That would be so, and then I'm just like, but is that who we are? I don't even know this company. I don't even know this, again,
Right.
I don't know. And there's something about the personal nature of who we are, and so it's a pain in the to ship out 100 hats, and you're standing in line at the post office, and you got people, but then at the same time to think that people are willing to do this, and so
that's another thing. We want our kids to take over it eventually. We want them to be in charge of it so they can make some extra money and be involved and teach them work.
Yeah, I don't know where this thing goes, but I know that we have a handful of companies that we just recently, you talk about go and get your beef over there.
Mm-hmm.
We just partnered with a little company called Farm Foods, farmfoodsmarket.com. Grass-fed beef. Right in the front door. There's tons of these companies out there. They're one of the few they're non-subscription based. They're cost effective, and then they link me with a ranch in Idaho. And so they're like, look, this is where it's coming from. And it's little tiny farms and ranches. Nice. And so anyway, the little guy, I guess, is who I'm always going to fight for.
Every time.
The dairies around here are shutting down. The little tiny, it's every week. There's hardly any left. When I was a kid, there was thousands of 60, 70 cow dairies around here. There's none. There's none. And so when a company comes to me and says, not only is it high quality products, grass-fed, but we're telling you exactly where it comes from, I'm just like,
I'm in.
If
I can support that little guy a little bit, you bet.
Yeah. And so I think the next chapter of our life up there is that path. If we're gonna, if 97% of the world eats meat, and I fall into that 97%, where am I getting my meat from? Am I hunting it? So I think the next chapter of our life is what I call the 1 degree away. If I didn't shoot it, raise it, harvest it, whatever, I better know who did. Okay, and that's the goal with our place up there.
Oh, I like that philosophy.
Whether it's, so I'll have the shop for the whatever tractors, whatever
whatever
crap
you're building.
I drag home.
Yeah. I got one for you.
I want to have
please.
I want to have a sugar shack that we can do this mess with the maple and see if there's something to that. The big thing is, it's 5,500 feet in elevation up there. We're going to have to use greenhouses. Mm-hmm. I want to get into aquaponics to a point where I haven't quite decided. I still believe in the traditional model of putting your plants in the ground and the nutrients that come from the ground. We have the most beautiful topsoil you've ever seen in your life up there, and to not utilize that to me is a sin.
Soil is so nice.
Yeah, but I guess if I could paint that picture, it would be to somehow prove that the philosophy that if Walmart doesn't have it, you don't need it, doesn't apply to us. If we can raise it, if we can source it from a sustainable company or in a way that's
responsibly raised. Yep.
Yeah. The barn, I'll build the shop out of bark beetle this summer. All the beams, everything will be all standing dead that I'll get off Forest Service.
Yeah.
And my little homemade sawmill, I'll make that work. And I guess that's it. If sometimes the hard way can be a long way. But man, it feels good.
But it feels good when it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it feels good getting there.
It's a rewarding way to live your life, especially if there's no debt attached to it. If the place is paid off, once the place is paid off, there's opportunity to accumulate other land. Right, if that's what we want to do. I don't know if that's what we want to do, but I don't want to be constrained by what the system, the monthly payments. But I also want internet. I also want the modern amenities that come with. And why can't we?
And
have?
Why not? Yeah.
Well, be able to get the things that you enjoy out of that, and then use the rest. Your sustainable life.
I think I envision someday having, over the summer months, having 25, 30 people come up there for a small fee, and doing a timber framing class and doing a blacksmithing class. I've got a friend here in town that's on a national level. He's recognized master blacksmith. Doing just these things that, again, working with the hands. To me, there's nothing more rewarding. Well, I don't care if it's taking a pallet and breaking a pallet down and making a chair out of it and standing back and going, well, next one will be better. But look, hey,
look, I got a chair.
Yeah,
and I made it.
Yeah, and then when you take that to the extremes, it's even more fun.
Yeah.
So I just appreciate you guys being willing to come up here and listen to me bump my gums for the last probably 3 hours.
We love it. We appreciate you being on and responding so quickly to us. Cause
only 2 hours and 40 minutes. You're good.
Yeah, I'm like a freight train.
You got 20 more minutes.
I'm just kidding. Get me moving. I'm hard to stop. But,
no, that's fantastic. You allowed us into your house and talk about your life and some of the stuff. I'm guessing a lot of the stuff we talked about, people on your YouTube channel don't know. You're showing a lot of other stuff there, and I've scrolled through a lot of your videos, seen a lot of them, but I didn't. There's way more there than you can sit and watch in a couple of days. It's there's a lot. You got a lot on there.
Yeah, and it's. I guess you never envision. You got to start somewhere, right?
And it
like
just goes.
You got to start somewhere with anything, and with that place up there, I didn't have the vision. When you're looking down the tunnel vision, whether it's the trees, whether it's sometimes you don't see the potential. Once you get to a certain point, it's forever. Like the long-term projects, I want to do a gnarly root cellar up there, where I can have half of it. I can have half an elk hanging in there.
Yeah.
One half of it will be for dry storage. One half will be for meat. I'll go down to the lake and I'll cut slabs of ice, to keep it cool. This is the stuff that.
Oh yeah,
my brain just won't stop.
That's great. Well, that's good stuff to be on too.
Being on a hill like that root cellar is not all that hard.
No, that's probably. I hope I can get to it this summer, but that shop's got to come first. But that's probably on the short list. All kinds of crazy stuff.
Let's finish the house first.
There you go.
Then you can build your root cellar.
Yeah, Cedar's like, let's get out of Mom's basement.
I've heard that more than once.
I can't make fun of the guy living in Mom's basement when I'm the guy living in Mom's basement. Thank you guys again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Yep.
And we'll anything else you want to add with any of the people that are helping you out and that kind of thing?
No, just again, thank you guys for being willing to travel like you did to come up here.
No problem.
And see. So,
all right,
worked out.
Thanks again.